Welcome, guests in Studio B, and welcome to the guest online, wherever you are logging in this afternoon, in morning, evening, around the world, to the second East-West Forum, Globalization, Re-Globalization, Where is the World Economy Moving? I have the pleasure to be your moderator this afternoon. I am Jill Deschner-Warner, and we have an exciting program planned for you. We are happy that you are joining in. Please take the opportunity to use our online chat to ask any questions as we go along. And we're going to take today a very deep look into the conversation and the topic of globalization, re-globalization. To begin, I would like to hand this over and give it to our Dean of Industrial Engineering, Professor Dr. Andreas Schmalfuß.
Herzlich willkommen, meine Damen und Herren, zum East-West-Forum in der zweiten Auflage. Wir haben das Thema gewählt, Globalisierung, Reglobalisierung. In den letzten 12 Monaten, seit dem letzten vergangenen Ost-West-Forum, hat sich einiges getan. Lieferketten sind zusammengebrochen. Die Preiskalkulation der verarbeitenden Industrie stimmt nicht mehr aufgrund der gestiegenen Energiekosten. Die Fachkräfteproblematik hat sich verstärkt. Wir möchten gerne mit Ihnen gemeinsam, namhaften Wissenschaftlern und Wissenschaftlerinnen, Vertreter der Wirtschaft und Unternehmern über die Auswirkungen der globalen Krise diskutieren und vor allen Dingen mit Ihnen diskutieren, wohin die Weltwirtschaft treibt. Lieferketten sind zusammengebrochen und die Unternehmen besinnen sich, Produktion wieder nach Europa zurückzuholen, Energiekreisläufe regional aufzubauen. Und diese spannende Frage, wie wir gegebenenfalls dorthin kommen, möchten wir heute zur zweiten Auflage des Ost-West-Forums mit Ihnen diskutieren. Eine wesentliche wissenschaftliche Fragestellung mit hoher praktischer Relevanz wird sein, wie können wir regionale Wirtschaftskreisläufe in Deutschland und Europa aufbauen. Zielsetzung ist quasi, die Transportkosten zu senken und natürlich auch die Lieferketten stabiler zu gestalten. Das heißt, wir brauchen dort einerseits wissenschaftliche Konzepte, wie solche regionalen Wirtschaftskreisläufe aufgebaut werden können und wie sie praktisch umgesetzt werden. Die Zielsetzung von regionalen Wirtschaftskreisläufen ist natürlich, das Wohlstandsniveau in Europa zu erhalten und natürlich die verarbeitende Industrie, die Europa groß gemacht hat, am Standort Europa zu sichern und auszubauen. In diesem Zusammenhang müssen wir Fragestellungen diskutieren, wie wir die Energiepreise stabil halten, wie wir verstärkte in regenerative Energien einsteigen können und darüber hinaus, wie wir die Fachkräfteproblematik in den nächsten Jahren sichern können. Ich freue mich, dass wir zahlreiche namhafte Referenten aus Wirtschaft, politischer Vertretung und der Wissenschaft begrüßen zu können. Frau Hermenau als Geschäftsführerin des Bundesverbandes Mittelständischer Wirtschaft im Freistaat Sachsen, Herrn Jankowski als Geschäftsführer der Gießerei in Leisnig und Herrn Professor Ragnitz als Vertreter des IFO-Institutes in Dresden. Ich glaube, durch diese Mischung, politische Vertretung, wissenschaftliche Vertretung und die Vertreter der Wirtschaft, dass wir eine spannende Diskussion haben und am Ende dann Lösungsmöglichkeiten für den Aufbau regionaler Lieferketten diskutiert und umsetzen können. Ich wünsche der Veranstaltung einen spannenden Verlauf, zahlreiche Diskussionen und freue mich auf spannende Vorträge.
Yes, so to support what Professor Dr. Schmalfuß said, it is an honor to have such experts with us here in Studio B, as well as online. As well as I would like to also welcome our students as well. We have guests with us from the US, we have guests with us from Germany, North Macedonia, the Ukraine, Spain, Poland. And so this is a great opportunity where we have the opportunity to sit together, chat together, and discuss these issues. Also, to provide support because of the importance of globalization and re-globalization, Dr. Matthias Rosler, he's the president of the Saxony Parliament, has also some opening words for us.
Sehr geehrter Herr Professor Schmalfuß, liebe Studentinnen und Studenten, meine Damen und Herren, ich begrüße Sie herzlich zum East-West Forum 2022 an der Hochschule Mittweida. Nach einer erfolgreichen Premiere im vergangenen Jahr findet diese Veranstaltung heute zum zweiten Male statt. Als Schirmherr ist es mir eine besondere Freude, zur Eröffnung einige Gedanken an Sie zu richten. Das Programm des Forums trägt in diesem Jahr den Titel Globalisierung und Re-Globalisierung. Wohin treibt die Weltwirtschaft? Und in der Tat ist diese Frage nach der Zukunft der internationalen Märkte eine der größten unserer Zeit. Gerade in Deutschland und in Sachsen sind wir auf eine starke Weltwirtschaft und den freien Handel angewiesen. Wie eine Redewendung besagt, bekommt unser Land schnell einen Schnupfen, wenn China oder Amerika niesen müssen. Im Moment sieht es leider danach aus. Es ist aber noch Zeit zu hoffen, dass wir die Erkältung abwenden können. Deutschland ist die führende Volkswirtschaft in Europa und eine der stärksten der Welt. Wir haben diesen Erfolg durch ein Zusammenspiel von Freiheit und Verantwortung, dem Kern der sozialen Marktwirtschaft, erreicht. Die wirtschaftliche Kraft der Bundesrepublik Deutschland, die Stärke des Freistaates Sachsen, gibt den Menschen hierzulande die Möglichkeit, ein selbstbestimmtes und sicheres Leben zu führen. Der erarbeitete Wohlstand versetzt uns in die Lage, die Zukunft eigenständig zu gestalten. Wir erhalten die wirtschaftliche Leistungsfähigkeit unseres Landes aber nur, wenn wir das hohe Niveau unserer Bildung sichern, den demografischen Wandel meistern, Anreize für Innovation und Investitionen setzen, die Energieversorgung gewährleisten und Kooperation weiter ausbauen. So verstehe ich auch den Ansatz des East-West-Forums. Es geht darum, kluge Ideen auszutauschen und neue Pfade zu beschreiten. Austausch und Dialog sind unverzichtbar, um Antworten auf die drängenden Fragen der Gegenwart zu finden. Vor allem in Krisenzeiten ist es wichtig, miteinander im Gespräch zu bleiben. Aus meiner Sichtung kommt Sachsen im Ost-West-Dialog eine besonders wichtige Rolle zu. Unser Freistaat versteht sich aufgrund seiner Lage in Europa und seiner Geschichte schon immer als Brücke. Unsere mittelständische Wirtschaft profitiert von einem starken Außenhandel. Sie unterhält belastbare Kontakte in alle Himmelsrichtungen. Sächsische Hochschulen pflegen starke Verbindungen ins europäische Ausland und darüber hinaus. Der Hochschule Mittweida ist es zum diesjährigen East-West-Forum erneut gelungen, namhafte Gäste aus den USA, Polen, Spanien, der Ukraine und weiteren Ländern zu gewinnen. Auf diese Weise baut das Format Netzwerke aus und bringt friedliche Zusammenarbeit zwischen den Ländern voran. Beschreiten Sie diesen Weg auf jeden Fall weiter, denn eine Abkehr vom weltweiten Handel erzeugt nur Verlierer im Osten wie im Westen. Kein Land kann es sich leisten, sich auf Dauer wirtschaftlich zu isolieren oder auf nur wenige Partner zu setzen. Abschließend gilt mein Dank besonders Ihnen, sehr geehrter Herr Professor Dr. Andreas Schmalfuß. Das East-West-Forum beruht auf Ihrer Initiative und ist für viele ein großer Gewinn. Sie fördern damit den internationalen Austausch und die globale Verständigung in erheblicher Weise. In diesem Sinne wünsche ich der heutigen Veranstaltung gutes Gelingen. Herzlichen Dank.
Yes, as Dr. Rosler mentioned, he said in his speech, the approach of the East-West Forum is to exchange smart ideas and tread new paths. And that is exactly where we are wanting to head today. But the question is, before we start heading that, where did this concept come from? And I would like to take a moment to explain where the concept of the East-West Forum came. Before, there was the German-Belarusian Forum, which was very successful in bringing together partnerships, and ideas of how we can work together and cooperate. Last year, it was thought, how can we renovate this? What can we do a little bit different? And the dean, Professor Schmalfuß, came up with the idea, let's make a platform where we bring the East and the West together to have the opportunity to discuss different topics. So last year we began with communication, and it was a very successful first East-West Forum. We had guests here from Romania, Poland, Italy, India, Spain, and it was the beginning of energy and getting things started in a conversation. With the second one, with what has been happening now in the world, there's been a lot of changes, and that is where the idea of globalization and re-globalization came into play. With that, we have a wonderful program starting for you this afternoon, wherever you are, in regards to discussing what is globalization, re-globalization, and then breaking it down into different areas. I would like to get this started and into the direction, and I would like to introduce Professor Dr. Joachim Rochlitz. He is the deputy head of the IFO in Dresden branch, and he is going to be speaking with us and giving us what we call the impulse in the beginning of our presentation. Please. Thank you.
Well, thanks a lot for the invitation here. I think I have a presentation that has been prepared. Oh. There it is. So, well, I should give a sort of impulse. Okay, I will give you some thoughts on globalization and deglobalization, not so much on re-globalization, but on the concept of globalization, and I concentrate on questions of international trade. Of course, globalization is much more. It's about FDI, that is foreign direct investment. It's about cooperation, about exchange and anything else. But I concentrate only on international trade. And well, my thoughts, my impulse, it's quite general, I think. Many things I will tell you, most of you already know. Nevertheless, I think for the beginning, it's good to remember some fundamentals of globalization, of international trade and international exchange. So I can, no, I can't. Can anyone? Okay. So here's the next slide. It's much text on the slide, I know. You don't have to read all of it. Well, the first proposition is, and I think most of you know that international trade and also foreign direct investment and so on leads to higher wealth in all countries, or in most countries that participate in this. Economic theory tells us we have specialization advantages. We have imports of intermediates or final goods that can be produced cheaper in other countries, which leads to productivity gains here. We have greater markets allowing economies of scale or learning effects, and all by this, it's also leading to productivity advantages in all countries. And one important thing is we have, by international trade, we have more competition, and competition always leads to more, well, innovation incentives and so on. And all these things will have the effect that wealth is increasing when we have free international trade. So, nevertheless, there are people who say globalization, we have too much globalization, or we have countries that want to have individual advantages of protection of their own industries. Look at the USA, look at China or other countries. This may be advantage in the short term, that's right, and it may be advantage if we have other objectives than economic ones. But in most cases, there are side effects which lead to a deterioration, it's a difficult word in English, that there are disadvantages also for the country that is protectionist, because we have exchange rate effects, because we have something like trade wars, or we have, well, a kind of reallocation of resources that leads to lower productivity, even in the country that is protectionism. So the next slide, please. So if we look at Germany, I think we are a very competitive economy. That's right, and we had much gain of globalization in the last years, or in the last 10, 20, or 30 years. We can see if we look at the manufacturing industries, which imports about 40% of their intermediate goods from other countries. And mostly these are countries which can produce these goods much cheaper. And by this you see that there are advantages for Germany at a whole, because we have higher income, we have higher innovation strategies, or higher innovation, and on the other hand, of course, we have also some risks or disadvantages, strong fragility in case of disturbances. I will show you that later on again, and in some parts of our industries we have also the problem that other countries try to pursue some strategic policies which might lead to difficulties in German industries too. So, as Mr. Rösler said, we have a strong interest in guaranteeing free trade, both on the import side but also on the export side. And deglobalization would be a problem, especially for Germany. We at the IFO Institute have some calculations about that, and they resulted in a 10 percentage point loss of GDP when Germany would refrain from globalization at all, which is quite much, I think. Okay, these are very general things I told you now. Next slide, please. Okay, many people say or think globalization did increase for a long time, and it continued to increase until today. But if you look at the figures, I was really surprised about that. We see some kind of decoupling of international trade on the one hand side and GDP on the other hand side. I've looked at export and import figures in relation to GDP, and you see, maybe you see it on the next slide, please. So you see that exports and imports in percent of GDP decreased in many parts of the world. In the USA, on the right upper part of the slide there. In China, we had the share of exports and of imports went down quite heavily. But even in Germany, we had a stagnation of exports and imports in percent of GDP in the last, well, about 15 years now. So, and of course, also in the world on the left upper side of the slide here. So you see, we had a strong increase in globalization in the 1970s, 1980s, and especially in the 1990s. But since then, there seems to be some kind of leveling out. Maybe it's in the next slide, please. Next slide, or not next? No, the slide before. Sorry. So maybe it's a kind of optimum or a kind of equilibrium. I actually do not know, but it's a kind of surprising, well, for me it was a surprise that globalization did not continue in the last 15 years. Okay. Okay, then this, thank you, this slide now. Here is my proposition that, not really a proposition, but a matter of fact, that we had a shift in trading partners in Germany, a strong shift. I took only some examples. The Netherlands, it's quite flat. Even the USA is quite flat. But if you look at France or other European countries, which is going down, despite the European market that we have since the 1990s, the share of France and other European countries went down in exports, but also in imports. And on the other hand, and that was the main driver of this, that the exports or imports between China and Germany were increasing quite heavily. We had say import share, that's the blue line, import share of about 2% in 1991, and now it's about 12%. And this is maybe a problematic development. I have a clock here now, so I'm getting a little bit nervous here, but please go to the next slide. Well, these are only the export shares and import shares of selected trading partners. We can skip it. You see China is now the most important import country with 12%. Next slide, please. And many people say, okay, we are very dependent on China. If we look at the statistics, we see, yes, we are very dependent with the trade in umbrellas, which is not very important, but about 77% of all umbrellas that are imported to Germany come from China, or feathers or silk or something like that. These are not so really important goods, but we have also important goods, which are electronics, with about an import share of 30% from China, and we have strong really high import shares from China in some products which are strategically very important, as some industrial raw materials, some other electronic devices. And indeed, there seems to be a problem, because we are dependent on a country that is not really, which pursues not very fair trade conditions, because they have a strategic policy there. They want to increase their power, their market power, their economic power, maybe also their political power, and maybe that's a problem that we have. We are dependent on some products from China that are really strategically important for us and for the German industries. And maybe that's a reason why there's a shift in German policies towards China at the moment. Okay, only 2 minutes now. So proposition 4, the next slide, please. So the thing that we also already heard about, all those frictions in supply chains, which is a very actual problem at the moment. You see here our figures from the IFO Institute, where we see that about 75% in September or October, these were about 65%. Okay, it goes a little bit down, but nevertheless, a majority of industrial firms face frictions in international supply chains. These are, at the moment, mainly temporary because these are due to the COVID restrictions, mainly in China, due to shipping problems from China to here, due to other temporary problems. There was a fire in a ship factory somewhere in Japan or something like that, which is also, it's only temporary, so it's not really a problem in the long run. But, and of course, the war in Ukraine is also a problem for these supply chains because some goods were imported in the past only from Ukraine or from Russia. However, okay, next slide, please. In some cases, these supply chain frictions might prove very long-lasting because they are due to shifts in demand for semiconductors, for example, and shifts in industrial raw materials, for example. They are also due to some labor market frictions, that is the demographic problems that we have. And so I fear that we will have supply chain problems also in the long run, and this might hamper German industries also in the next years. But the question is how to deal with that. Next, and again, next slide. So I will come to the end now. I think we have really problems in some parts of the export and import sectors, but the solution will not be to lower globalization or something like that. That is, a further deglobalization is not the solution because it will hamper or decrease wealth in Germany. So the solution must be, in my opinion, to have a diversification of supply chains. We have to make treaties, free trade treaties with many countries and stable treaties with many countries, especially with China and other South Asian countries, to have good planning conditions for the enterprises. And of course, we need to modernize the German economy by structural change, by concentrating on high innovative or high technology products, which is always true. But the solution, I think, cannot be to refrain from international trade because this would lower growth here or lower wealth here. And maybe that's something that we can discuss in our group here and with all those people who are watching worldwide, maybe. So I hope I gave you some points where we can discuss now. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Dr. Ragnitz. And again, this was the impulse to get us to start thinking, seeing the figures, seeing the information, seeing the facts that he's provided, to have us start looking a little bit. Is it really deglobalization what we should be looking at? Re-globalization? What is globalization? And that is the importance of what we're wanting to, as stated earlier, the opportunity, a platform to discuss. To continue, now that we are impulsed and we have a little bit more enlightenment in this area, we are going to get into our next section in which we're having lightning talks. Lightning talks are giving us a little bit of energy to see how globalization is looked at in different areas. We have with us guests from companies, from human resources management, from finance field, and different areas that are going to give us a look at how it is being sought after? How is globalization affecting them now? And to begin with our lightning talks, I would like to hand it over to Mr. Harald Wolf. He is the head of digital risk at Deloitte Company GmbH, auditing company here in Germany. Please.
So thank you very much, first of all, for the invitation. It's a pleasure for me to be here. First time for me in Mittweida, yeah, and of course it's an honor for me to opening up the lightning talks, which is also the first time here. So always, if you travel, you always have the question of transportation, yeah. And when I plan my travel here to Mittweida, and I'm every 2 weeks in Leipzig because we have there one of our technology centers. I raised the question to my assistants how to go there, via train, via car, of course not flying, yeah, but she then tried to find out what is the best approach, and she told me, well, by car, there's no option, yeah? There's no rental car company which will rent us a car to go to Mittweida. And the reason for this was pretty interesting because on the website, you could really read it, it was down to delivery problems in the automotive industry. Yeah, so, and this is exactly what Professor Dr. Rangnitz said. This is supply chain issues which are affecting our life today here, right now. Yeah? So we see what happens when supply chains on a global level, where everybody believes that they should work instantly, are not working. And we from Deloitte, we of course advising our clients and our industry clients especially, how to deal with it. And we, of course, we are observing the market with our more than 300 employees globally and try to find out where are the trends going, what happens in the industry, and how those kind of issues can be overcome or can be tackled also in the future. And I brought with me some slides which should underpin my talk to you and try to give you some more insights about how we see this supply chain topic. Yeah? And what we see, there are two major trends where I will come to it later on. Yeah? If you could maybe go one slide further, thank you. So I think in the past, supply chains and all the globalization was to some degree driven by two very easy topics. It was mainly around cost savings and efficiency. So many companies talking about going to China or going to companies, they want to get the labor arbitrage. Yeah? So which means having the effect of cheap labor costs, cheap production sites, and bringing it to the Western market to increase their margin or to stay competitive. Yeah? This fosters a development where companies really easily split their supply chains. Yeah? Try to get Asian companies into the supply chain or even Eastern European companies. Even if you go to Ukraine, the war has a huge impact to the German automotive industry at the beginning. Yeah? So what we see here is that global supply chains become more interdependent. Yeah? So if you have a small break, like in the Suez Channel just a few years ago, you see what is the effect. Yeah? You have very, let me say, increasingly subject to external shocks, yeah? Whatever it is, if it's a pandemic or if it is also a war. Yeah? And of course, you have this geopolitical tensions that we have seen in the last months between China and the US, yeah, where there's also something coming up. Nobody knows where this will go, yeah, but it is something where you really have to think about how your supply chain has to be designed and maintained in the future, yeah. Because I think one thing is clear, going back to the old economy is maybe not an option that will work, yeah. So therefore, I think the important topic here is what are the key elements how to manage supply chains in our today's world. And if you go to the next slide, please. What we see on a global level, there are mainly two major trends. And one of those trends, the reshoring, has come up already some years ago. When you remember what the US was doing to do, they protected their market for some material, yeah. And what happens there, of course, the industry goes into the US market and try to build up plants there already. Yeah? It was forced by the government to a certain degree, but not all. Nowadays, what we see is more strategic shift, especially in regards to the semiconductor industry. I will come to this later on, where the US really is trying to build up strategic, important industry for them in the US market with plants and everything. And you can also see it here in Europe, by the way. If you go here in the eastern part of Germany, that there are also new semiconductor plants in the way to get set up. Another approach is what we call friendshoring, which means strategic alliances between nations who have the same strategic approach, the same desire, maybe also who still believe in globalization as a benefit to grow their economies. And this is something which of course means that it needs to be something which is also government supported, in regards to alliances. You see here on the slide the example between India, Australia, and Japan, which is one of those examples, but there are also other alliances that we see coming up globally, which can support and which will support also, of course, and stabilize reliable supply chains. Having said this, of course, this is not something which replaces nearshoring and offshoring, but it supplements it, because you still can use the same leverage effects, but maybe in a slightly different way, in a way where you do it more accurate, more controlled than it was done before. And if you go to the next slide, please. So, and here I've brought with me the example of the semiconductor supply chain, which I think might be well known to some of you here in the audience. So what you can see here is how it is split up still today, I believe, where you see a lot of the, let me say, thinking, a lot of the preparation of the manufacturing of semiconductor is done within the United States, as well as in some parts of Eastern Asia, which is, let me say, more part of the Western community. But there are still some significant activities which are done mainly in China or in the wider China area, so-called also Taiwan. And I think that's exactly one of the very high important topics and very sensible, of course, to this disruption. Let's assume this strategic activities are going into, let me say, bad direction, then of course this will heavily affect our whole industry globally. So therefore, the intention is to really bring this up to a more reliable situation and to a reliable supply chain. You see an optional approach here on the right-hand side of the slide, so that you really rebalance the manufacturing capabilities, and by this also have a clearer view on what is possible to stabilize the full supply chain, just as an example. This will also, of course, apply to other industries, if you look, for example, to the automotive industry in the same way. If you go now to the next slide, so what need companies to do and also governments to do? Because it's a joint approach, if you look to this, because it is strategically also driven by global effects. And it sounds pretty easy because, first of all, know your supply chains. It sounds very easy, but it's very hard to do because what we see at clients is that only some of them really understands where the supply is coming from, especially in complex products like cars or like, for example, digital equipment. Then, of course, you have to identify the critical parts in this, so parts that you can easily replace or make redundant from a supplier perspective, and you have to decide what to do with it, and how to make it more reliable in the way. And the third point is, of course, bringing up to a permanent state, which means maintaining, orchestrating your supply chain in a way that it is resilient, that it is reliable, that it supports your way of production without interruption. So these are the three topics where companies need to focus on. And of course, as I said, it sounds easy, but it is in detail. It's a very complex effort to do, but it is necessary for companies in those days to really survive and provide their clients and their customers stable products and stable production. Nevertheless, we don't believe that globalization will go away. We still believe that it will continue, but maybe in with a different approach, and which more with more risk management in it, yeah, than it was done in the years before. So thank you very much and with this, I'm closing.
Thank you, Mr. Wolf. We have a moment if anyone would like to ask a particular question to Mr. Wolf while we have him here at the podium regarding this presentation and what he discussed in regards to the supply chains.
I would like to know whether you think that the reshoring of supply chains just started after Lehman Brothers came down or a couple of years ago already?
Well, what we observe, it really gets accelerated just a few years ago. Yeah? And it's now really getting really accelerated due to the conflict that we see. Yeah? So it was a let me say trend that maybe started 3-4 years ago, yeah, slightly, but now it's really getting traction.
We have a microphone, or
My question is related with your. Thank you. My question is related with the friendshoring, which has been we have seen related with the Quad countries, including India, Australia, Japan, and US.
Yeah.
How you see that friendshoring cooperation in deglobalization world or globalization world? What you can see?
Yeah, well, it's still a type of globalization, right? But it is down to some really dedicated strategic partners, yeah? Which of course is a really an alternative to what we see today, yeah? Where does it lead us to? We don't know. Maybe it can lead us to 2 different worlds. We don't know, yeah? But I think at least it is showing that going back to a deglobalized state is something which most of the nations and most of the companies, at least in the Western world, are not looking to go for.
Yeah. This is the new era with what we are watching by new friendship and impacting the world trade, and that was my question.
And you see the same approaches with China when they talk about Seidenstraße, yeah, so they're trying to set up a similar concept, yeah. So therefore I think you can see those trends, yeah.
Thank you.
thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr.
Thank
Wolf.
you.
We're going to move on now to our next lightning talk, and we have with us from the University of Applied Sciences, Professor Dr. Frank Schumann. He is the Chair of Human Resources Management and Business Psychology. So, please, welcome.
So I try it. So, yeah, hello, my name is Frank Schumann. I'm a professor at University Mittweida, HR. Having a little time for an amazing, huge topic is a dilemma. It's a real dilemma. Nevertheless, I will accept the challenge and try to keep it short. Maybe it is a short lesson for the students. If I exceed the time limit, we agree to clarify questions during the break so that the time structure of the whole event does not fail. So, okay. Yeah, globalization influences organizations. Organizations has to compete on an international level. So globalization is a major factor affecting organizations competing for customers with high expectations for performance, quality, low costs. The international movement of goods and services has accelerated exponentially, NAFTA, ASEAN, and so globalization exerts pressure on HRM functions, human resource management functions, because HRM practices differ across countries in, for example, in compensations, in benefits, in labor relations, and so on. Next slide. Oh, yes. Gupta und Govindarian maintain that global presence may translate into competence advantage when companies integrate local market differences, realize global economies of scales, and effectively transfer knowledge and technology across borders. Best practices do not always translate to other cultures, so we always have to adapt it a little bit. Next slide. Ulrich argued that human resources must provide value to their organizations as viewed by investors, line managers, employees, and this value results in competence advantage. To help organizations remain competitive, human resource management must refine its role and organizational contributions. Best HRM practices may not always transfer across countries due to cultural and institutional differences. Organizations have to balance the need to standardize best HRM practices across national boundaries with the need to adapt to local practices and customs. This phenomena is labeled institutional duality. The appropriate balance between these two needs will positively affect organizational performance. Next slide, please. So, what from the literature can we give as a guideline to bring values to the organizations as HR on the one hand, and to be effective in different cultures on the other hand? Perhaps the model of Ulrich and Hofstede's theory of cross-cultural differences offer an interesting perspective. So, next slide, please. Maybe you know the roles, the 4 role models from Ulrich. Ulrich HRM models consist of 4 roles with associated deliverables. The first role, strategic partner, requires that HR managers align HR initiatives with strategic organizational goals. The deliverable for this role is an executive strategy that creates values as seen by major organizational stakeholders, investors, line managers, and employees. The second role, change agent, delivers a renewed organization that is more competitive. To achieve and maintain competitive advantage, organizations must adapt to inevitable changes in the competitive landscape, government, regulations, global economy. The third role, an administrative expert, delivers efficient processes, for instance, recruitment, selection, training, benefits, workforce planning, and so on, that utilize new technologies and improved methods. The fourth role, the last one, employee champion, maximizes employee contribution and commitment in 2 ways. First, HR managers listen and respond to employees' need with available resources. Second, HRM practices increase employees' knowledge, skills, and abilities to contribute to organization effectiveness. Next slide, please. Now you can see the cultural dimensions from Gerd Hofstede. In order to combine Ulrich's roles with the cultural dimension, we still need to present them briefly, some characteristics. Uncertainty avoidance refers to the degree that people are comfortable with ambiguity. Individuals in high uncertainty avoidance place great value on stability and certainty and favor a variety mechanism that increases a sense of security in uncertain situations. Masculinity, femininity describes the degree that individuals exhibit masculine or feminine values and behaviors. High masculine cultures are characterized by clearly differentiated sex roles, independent performance, achievements, and ambitions with while feminine cultures are characterized by equal sex roles, quality of life, and helping others. The next, individualism, collectivism dimension of Hofstede's cross-cultural research refers to the extent that individuals focus on individual needs and wants versus the needs of the group. Cultures that lean towards the individualism side of this cultural continuum stress responsibility and achievement by individuals, while cultures where lean towards collectivism emphasize group efforts, teamwork, and group membership. The fourth dimension of Hofstede's analysis is power distance, which reflects the degree that individuals accept differences between people as legitimate and expected. Cultures high on power distance see differences between subordinates and their superiors as distinct with wide status differentials. Individuals in low power distance cultures see fewer differences between reporting relationships, superiors are more accessible, and differences between the sexes with respect to status is less pronounced. The long short-term orientation is the fifth dimension described by Hofstede. Short-term orientation focuses on the present and the past, honors tradition, and consume resources to meet present needs. Conversely, culture characterized by long-term orientation are future-oriented. Resources are safe to meet future contingencies. The sixth cultural dimension is still quite new and is described how free expressions of one's own needs in handled with society. This includes questions such how pleasure-oriented leisure activities are, how openly sexuality is lived out, whether more or less colorful clothing is worn, or whether there is a more optimistic or more pessimistic view in the future. The culture with greater restriction maintain law and order has a high priority. Next slide. So when we combine both approaches, the role model from Ulrich and the cultural dimension, we can helpful suggestions emerge. Some of these you can read for your own. You can see some examples: strategic partner, masculinity, femininity as dimension, tailor HR manager leadership style to culture, or change agent as a role in masculinity, femininity dimension. In high masculinity cultures, plan to overcome resistance when making leadership assignments and responsibility to employees. Next slide. Another example, individualism, collectivism. The other two roles of HR: make incentives for achieving administrative improvements on an individual or collective basis, congruent with the cultures, clear, and employee champion, advocating for employees on an individual basis may meet resistance in collectivistic cultures. So, next slide. I believe there's no more time. Quickly, conclusion. The world is changing in any time. In HRM, we will always be affected by the culture. Wherever we go, our HRM practices should be based on it. And so thanks you for your patience and for your attention.
Thank you very much, Professor Dr. Schumann. We do have time to take one question, especially because this is such an interesting field with human resources management. We will open the floor to our online viewers for a question, or here in Studio B.
Maybe in the break. Maybe in the break.
I will throw out a question. I'm not going to let you leave until a question comes to you. My question is then, where do you see regarding the leadership styles in human resources right now, because of what all is happening? Do we as leaders in companies need to be flexible? What tip would you give in this area regarding the globalization and how it is affecting international management or HR?
Maybe the answer is short. Flexible styles are the best styles. It depends on situations, and the older styles doesn't work in this time. Flexibility in styles is that what success made are.
And I think we've probably seen this in the last couple years with the pandemic, how companies have had to be a little bit flexible in how companies or businesses are being run.
Time is changing. No style is for every time. Today we know situations make the style. That is, wie heißt das? That is needed. So, yeah.
Good. Thank you very much. I'm sure you'll be getting questions during our break, and also when we have our panel discussion, I have a feeling this is going to come back up.
Okay, thanks.
My question is more about intercultural communication related to the human resource management, right? So, what is your point of view when an international company from the developed economies going to the emerging economies, and then they are shifting HR from developed to developing? Are you going to suggest us that it depends also the collectivism or feminism or a masculinism that the company is supposed to decide and make their strategy once they decide to relocate their HRs? How you suggest that?
I'm not sure I understand your question. The economies in Europe are differentiated.
It's like about globalization. So multinationals, they make their strategies to relocate their strategies to the developing emerging economies. Most of them, they are moving now. So once established MNCs, multinational corporations, when they plan, for example, from Germany going to China or Germany going to India, right? So what is your point of view? If they supposed to take care of also their human resource management because they have to have local management system inside the country where they're going to relocate, and they're focusing on masculine or feminine HR psychological point of view? That was my question straightway.
Gerd Hofstede's dimensions are a framework. Yes, it's only a framework, and the situation in a concrete location can be different. So you have to adapt. Whether it's masculine or femininity, it's quite problem solving. So and now it's the flexibility also to react in the best way. We are looking for the best way, and so it's difficult. Quite, what is the way? You can do it, and you can do it in trial and error. It's not cheap, but you can use the framework as a first idea. I mentioned. Okay.
Thank you very much, and thank you.
Danke.
Good. We are going to continue now in discussing the next lightning talk. Again, we're building up our energy in different areas. And we have with us today, from the head of the International Relations Department at the Saxony State Chancellery, we have with us this evening Dr. David Michel. You can use this if you like.
Professor Schmalfuß, dear professors, dear ladies and gentlemen, dear organizers of this conference, dear students, thank you very much for inviting me to this interesting conference today. And I'm sorry for that I have no presentation for you, so you will be forced to listen to me. In dealing of the topic of globalization, deglobalization, re-globalization, we already talked about the several names for that, and also in the view of the fact that we are here at the university, I had also to think back to my own students' days in the mid-90s, which admittedly was some time ago, but perhaps not so long ago that some fundamental paradigms were already supposed to change in that time. So during my students' days as a law student, I was connected with the fundamental assumption that good international trade relations are the best guarantor of peace. After all, what nation will voluntarily jeopardize the prosperity it was built on trade? Dear ladies and gentlemen, the Russian war in the Ukraine, the tense relation between China and Taiwan, and many other conflict zones on the world showed that the principle must be questioned on again. We are currently experiencing also a wave of immigration and refugees such as we last experienced in 2015-2016. Even though this wave of immigration is supplemented by other new challenges and influences that are not necessarily comparable to 2015, we find ourselves in the center of a great challenge to provide skilled workers for a changing labor market. Well, ladies and gentlemen, what we have consciously built up over decades cannot be reversed in some months. We have all worked together to globalize, to internationalize, explaining students why this world needs intercultural skills, why it makes sense to learn languages, where the markets of the future will be, why we need highly qualified people and professionals. We have used our professional and our political travels to open and keep open doors in China and other countries, to reach markets and to reach the hearts of local people by transporting art and cultural events abroad. We managed to organize just-in-time deliveries from Shanghai, for example, every region in Germany. We thought we could plan the future down to the last detail. However, we have to realize that the human factor is an unpredictable factor and that the continuously changing framework conditions require continuous adjustment of our planning. When I mention just-in-time deliveries, I would like to address another topic that we are currently addressing in the Saxon State Chancellery by preparing a conference and by asking us an initial question. And it was already mentioned by Mr. Wolf from Deloitte here. What do the blockade of the Suez Canal by the Ever Given, the corona pandemic, and Russia's invasion of Ukraine have in common? Also, they are very different events. They have all managed to highlight the vulnerability of global supply chains. For example, an international task sharing had become established in the global economy, from which it was assumed that all parties involved would benefit. In the supplying and producing countries, which are often located in Asia, jobs are supposed to be created and thus economy and social development promoted. At the same time, the global north benefits from diverse and cheap products made possible by the lower production costs in the countries at the beginning of the chain. In practice, however, this task sharing often results in poor working conditions, low wages, unequal dependencies, and the destruction of natural ecosystems. These costs are incurred almost exclusively in the countries of the global south. Many global supply chains were already in a state of crisis prior to the pandemic. Yet it has become even more visible in the global north. through the war on Ukraine and its development of the last 8 months. At the same time, however, current developments, many speak of crisis, have further worsened the state supply chain. Lockdowns have paralyzed production, basic labor rights have been curtailed, importers have stopped taking delivery of goods, or there is a lack of parts and materials to finish products. While European governments are taking target measures to minimize the impact of the population and the economy, many countries in the global south do not have these options. The multiple challenges, but also crises, have thus adversely affected success already achieved in many countries, for example, in poverty reduction or in environmental and climate protection. The question is, how can we achieve a transformation of supply chains that ensures that all stakeholders actually benefit from a global task sharing, that human rights are respected, and that their natural resources are protected. Forgive me that I'm having to draw this board to explain what shapes and moves my work and our work in the State Chancellery. Moderating, accompanying, and helping to shape international relations in the State Chancellery cannot avoid keeping an eye on all these issues and following developments in order to set the right priorities for the future. Our activities aim to network Saxony in and with foreign countries on many levels, and in many areas to open doors and keep them open for trade, business, investors, and investments, to market Saxony abroad, to stimulate interests, to make research and science partnerships possible, and to provide the framework for the maintenance, to make art and culture known abroad, to inspire tourists for Saxony. All of this cannot be organized according to a continuously unchanging pattern. The influences are manifold, and the framework conditions are constantly changing and at what feels like an increasingly rapid pace. And if I have already mentioned the Global South, then our commitment there is also playing an increasingly important role, especially in these times. Because the Global North benefits massively economically from global supply chains and therefore also bears a special responsibility for negative consequences in other regions of the world. As the State Chancellery, we are committed to development cooperation with a focus on supporting civil society through development policy measures by supporting the small project fund at the North-South bridges, or by supporting individual cases such as school lessons for school children of refugees in Lebanon affected by the Syrian crisis. We support this project alone with about 250,000 euro per year. One of our priorities in the last time is in Africa, Uganda. Uganda is an African country that is very involved in accepting African refugees within their country and in which numerous Saxon NGOs are active. Global political developments have encouraged us to continue on this path. Maintaining and further expanding a technological lead is also what concerns us in Saxony, what drives us continuously to invest in high-tech research, to enter into university and research partnerships worldwide, to conduct top research with top researchers in Saxony, generating and maintaining attention for Saxony as a location with appropriate international conferences and institutions. The German-Polish Center for Advanced System Understanding in Görlitz, Kasus, which was set up, is exemplary for interdisciplinary research that is open to researchers from all over the world in order to rethink systems research together. The same applies to the decision taken on the 29th September of this year during the science-led competition under the theme Knowledge Creates Perspectives for the Region to establish 2 new large-scale research centers with international appeal in Saxony's Lusatia region and in the central German mining area in the next few years in order to attract outstanding scientists who conduct excellence research with a view to major challenges facing society. The large-scale research centers, which I mentioned, namely the German Center for Astrophysics in Lusatia in Saxony and the Center for the Transformation of Chemistry, will be able to operate with an annual budget up to 170 million euros each and are expected to create more than 3,000 new jobs in the region. This is what drives us to bundle the highest level of know-how here in our region, to network, to be connected with the world, to make an important contribution, to be part of progress, instead of only running after the progress and new technologies. Also, we are looking at new markets and target countries. We are also growing together with our immediate neighbors, such as Czech Republic and Poland, especially in a border region. The COVID pandemic has strengthened our mutual solidarity, as has the war in Ukraine, which has led to numerous joint deliveries to Ukraine, but also has shown us how we can rely on each other in difficult situations. The Russian-Ukraine conflict seems to know only damages, loss, and negative development worldwide. The growth economies of Southeast Asia seems to be exempt. The importance of Southeast Asia was also pointed out by the Federal President Steinmeier during his recent trip to the region. In the region from Myanmar in the northwest to Indonesia in the southeast, the population has more than doubled in the last 50 years, from once 300 to almost 700 million people. The number of potential consumers and producers is thus increasing with each passing year. And this region's shares of the global economy increased from 1.5% to 3.7% between 1990 and 2019, and expected to be at 4.5% in 2022. From Saxony's point of view, it also means a huge market, an opportunity for our economy, on which our efforts are also directed through appropriate travel of our political representatives. At the same time, this region is also a huge reservoir of potential skilled workers, which is also of interest for us. And I will come to the final, I see the time. And dear ladies and gentlemen, as you can see, we cannot do one without the other. We will only be strong if we continue to develop our qualities and skills locally, but without further networking and being connected to the global markets, we will hardly be successful. I would be curious to know what today's students will look back on in 30 years and what they will sum up. I thank you for your attention. Even I could only present just a small excerpt due to the shortness of time when it comes to pointing out the consequences of global economic developments, the pandemic and so on, in our or my range of activities. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mischel. We do also want to take time because, again, this was an interesting presentation that hopefully sparked a lot of ideas, thoughts, concerns that you have, that we would like to take his expertise time and open it to the public as well as online for, we'll take a question.
You mentioned a lot of regions, so South Asia, Africa, also East Europe. Sorry, you mentioned a lot of regions in your presentation. Is it some priorities for Saxony, and if it's some, what factors are playing the role and where the priorities are?
Yeah, that's why I choose these regions of Southeast Asia that we are focusing on. That's why I also mentioned our neighbors. So we all the time we had very good relations to our direct neighbors, but now it seems that we are more focusing on them and that we see that we can do more together. So a couple of years ago, we were focusing on what we can do abroad. Now we are looking at what we can do with our neighbors in Poland, what we can do with our neighbors in the Czech Republic together somewhere on the world, or how can we present ourselves somewhere worldwide together. And naturally, we look at the markets which are growing. So, and also in regions that were not on our direct focus a couple of years ago. So, what I wanted to show is that the frameworks that we find now are different framework that we had a couple of years ago, and that we have to organize ourselves again. So, the markets that we had half a year, 1 year ago, and the partners that we have are maybe not anymore the partners that we are looking today for. So we always have to take into consider the framework that is changing around us, and to look for new partners, but also to recognize the partners that we had and to look how we can establish new connections.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank
Yeah, may I?
Yeah, quick.
Okay, halten Sie fest. One of the most important factors of competitiveness of Saxon enterprises is actually the energy price. This is spoiled, meanwhile. And I'm not speaking about non-wage labor costs or about other costs rising through inflation. I'm just talking about the energy prices. And this is a game changer that happened this year. And we will never go back to that convenient and cheap energy we had. So now the really $100 question is, will Saxon enterprises be able to compete within the next 3 years, or won't they?
That's a question by talking about re-globalization and how can we bring companies or work back to our region. And that's what the companies are talking about, and what is maybe a problem for them to re-globalize, because we have, in fact, this problem of very high energy costs. We had before already the problem of high labor costs, comparing to other regions. And this was finally also the reason why we went the way of globalization and why we moved and shifted everything to China and so on. And now we have this problem of the rising energy costs. So the government tries to do everything how to fix it, how to support the companies. The question is for how long time we will have the money and the power to support the companies. It was the same question like during the pandemic. So everyone was asking himself, how long the government and the state will be there to support the companies. So everyone was happy that the pandemic someone was finished. And the same is now with the energy costs. So, but it's not only a problem for us here in the region. Many other regions worldwide have the same problem. And we have to look how other countries will manage this problem, and always also look abroad to get like some best practice experience, how they could support their enterprises. And it's become also a new frame for competition for companies, of course. And it's also, again, something that maybe don't bring back all the companies. Maybe with this energy cost, it's again a push for them to go again abroad and to produce somewhere else. Because I see also the interest of companies, even for Southeast Asia, because not of the reason just that there is a very fast growing market, it's the same like in India and so on, but also the possibility of cooperation, or maybe also of the possibility to transfer the production to these regions. So we will see how we can work with this problem.
Thank you. And thank you very much, Dr. Mischel. And I have a feeling this is a question that will definitely be coming up again during our panel discussion. Yes, because I think it is one of a lot of legitimacy. Before we finish with our lightning talks, we have one final speaker with us who is going to take us in the full realm of this. And he is unable to be with us here this evening in Studio B as well as online, but he has sent a video, and that is Professor Dr. Alexia Joseph. And he is a professor at Oles Honor Dnipro, and it's the university in the Ukraine. So he will be discussing with us a little bit in regards to the financial side of what globalization has done.
Liebe Kollegen, liebe Freunde, I am very grateful to you for giving me the opportunity to hold a short message today on the tribune of this forum. Over the many years of our cooperation with your university, more than 15 years, with some of your professors and officers, we have become not just colleagues but also good and close friends. And so I am doubly pleased to have a small speech in this forum today. I'd like to offer you some of my observations, which, as it seems to me, are very interesting, and they directly relate to the topic of the forum, namely the issue of globalization of world financial markets. Understanding what phase the economic cycle is in is very important for those who are involved in investment activities. Why is it important? I won't tell you anything new here. Everyone knows that when the market is in the position of lows, you should to buy, and when the market is at the maximum levels of its development, it's better to sell. But how to recognize this minimum and maximum levels? How to determine what phase the market is in? Quite often, the following indicators are used to determine the current phase of the cycle. It is inversion of the yield difference curve, lowering the FRS rate, gold prices, and Buffett indicator. Since I don't have much time for a speech, I'd like to tell you a few words only about the first indicator, about the inversion of the yield difference curve. That is, about lowering this curve below the zero line. I'll be talking about the 10 years versus 2-year US Treasury yield curve. It has been noticed that the inversion of this curve is a warning of an approaching recession. Now let's look at some pictures, please. In this figure, the top line represents the dynamics of the stock market index. The broken red line at the bottom of the chart is the difference between the yields of 10-year, 2-year, and 2-year US Treasury bonds. In a stable economy, long-term bonds have higher yields than short-term ones, so the difference curve will be in the zone above zero. On the eve of a recession, most investors anticipate an increase in risks in the economy and start selling short-term bonds. With mass sales of short-term bonds, there is a sharp excess of their supply over demand, and accordingly their price falls, and as a result their profitability is growing. Accordingly, the difference between the yields of 10-year and 2-year bonds gradually decreases, and when the yield of short-term bonds became higher than long-term ones, the curve inverts. That is, the curve drops below zero line into the negative zone. In its classical form, the yield difference inversion indicator is used to determine the possible onset of a recession in the economy. But for example, for investors, the fact of a recession is not so critical. Why? Well, as you know, a recession is defined as a decline in GDP for 2 quarters in a row. So the investors learn about the fact of a recession at least 6 months after the recession has already begun. And accordingly, they will no longer be able to make investment decisions based on this fact, because it's just too late. For investors, more important is early warning of possible fall in the stock market. That's why I propose to use the yield curve inversion indicator not in its classical form, but for more practical purposes, that is, for early warning of a possible market fall. Please, let's look at some of my observations. These two charts. The top chart reflects the dynamic of the difference between the yield of 10-year and 2-year bonds for the period from 1989 to September this year. The moments of inversions are indicated by ovals. The bottom chart shows the performance of the Standard & Poor's 500 stock market index over the same time period on a logarithmic scale. The significant falls are marked by ovals. The chart shows that, as a rule, the market reacts quickly enough to the effect of inversions. Here, in this place, the inversion occurred on 8th of March 90, and the market began to fall on 19th of July 90, that is 4 months and 10 days after the inversion. In 2000, the inversion was fixed on the 2nd of February, and the fall of the market began 7 months after inversion. Before the financial crisis of 2008-2009, several inversions were recorded in a row. The last inversion took place on May 30, 2007. And a little less than 5 months later, the stock market began its dramatic fall. Then the index lost almost 60% of its value. And here is a recent story. The inversion occurred on 27th of August 2019, and the sharp collapse of the stock market began on 19th of February 2020, that is after 5.5 months. Now please let's look at current events. This selected time period inside this gray zone, I suggest you consider on a separate interactive chart so that you can better supervise everything that is going on. This inversion was recorded on 8th of July this year, and the negative difference between the yield of long and short-term bonds is increasing more and more. If we take into account the fact that in past years the time lag between the inversion and the beginning of a market fall was 5 to 6 months, then we can say that we are now literally on the verge of a new serious market fall. That is, it can happen, I would say, in December or January or somewhere nearby. I'm really worried about this last convincing inversion and the increasing negative difference between long-term and short-term bond yields. The US stock market is the largest market in the world so far, and if storm starts there, then in the era of globalization, this is instantly reflected in all world markets, and of course also on the market of your country. I don't pretend to be the ultimate truth, and my task, as I saw it, was only to draw your attention to the alarming signal that I just told you about. Thank you very much for your attention.
So, thank you very much. We have come to the point that we have now had our lightning talks. We've heard a little bit of motivation or contemplating into the areas that has been brought to our attention. We're now going to take a break. You have some time to think it through, and we're coming back in a few minutes at 17:20, 5:20, and we're going to then begin. We have 2 presentations, one from the US and one from North Macedonia, so these will both be very interesting from 2 different sides. So please enjoy your break, get up, move around, and we will see you back again at 17:20 or 5:20. Welcome back to the second part of our forum this afternoon. Before we start into our presentations, I again just want to give you and remind you the opportunity that if you have questions for everyone in the audience as well as online, to please write in the chat or have them available. We'll be coming around with a microphone afterwards, after the presentation, that we make the floor open and you can ask your questions. But without further ado, I would like to begin in introducing our next presenter. He is from our partner university in the United States. He comes from Shepherd University in Shepherdstown, West Virginia, and this is Professor Dr. Samuel Green, and he is a professor in the Department of Political Science, Global Studies, and Geography. Without further ado, Dr. Green.
Well, thank you very much, Jill. Thank you to Mitvida for the invitation. Thank you to everyone here for your attention and hopefully your fantastic questions as well. I'm especially looking forward to see if maybe some students have a good challenging question for me. Right, so next slide, please. No, we're working, excellent. So I wanted to briefly define two things before we dive into what they might mean for investment. There's thousands of definitions of globalization, but this one's simple. So we're talking about the fast, interdependent spread of open society, open economy, and open technology. I'll come back to the asterisk. And I want to also talk about risk, because risk is something we're going to think a lot about when we think about investment. And risk is bad things happening, the potential unwanted outcome resulting from something, determined by its likelihood or probability and the consequences or impact. So we're asking how likely and how bad is something going to happen given our circumstances. So what globalization means, the pre-era, in our open economy, we eliminate trade barriers. We have an open society. Globalization is spreading ideas. We have open technology through digital communication, through the infrastructure. We've talked a lot already tonight about the global supply chain. So ideas are moving instantly. Goods are moving very quickly. People are moving more quickly than before, although, of course, there are already limits. It depends on what passport you have. And so sometimes we think of globalization as sort of perfectly open, but it's important to be aware, those of us from the developed world, that these limitations exist for so much of the world. So if you're thinking about investment in the globalized context, you're making assumptions. You're making assumptions, and I'll come back to this, that under the open economy, commitment to low trade barriers will endure, that the open society from globalization is positive, that the infrastructure of globalization will remain reliable. Again, we've talked about the supply chain. That the benefits from this open world will be widely recognized and will lead to increased prosperity, and that the liberal world will lead to a peace dividend. Although, of course, and we'll get to this has been contested in international relations even before recently. But if we go back, I have two pictures here that illustrate what I call the era of high globalization. From something like 1992 to something like 2012, I'll explain the end date. Right, one picture is the Chinese accession to the WTO. The other is a curious picture, and I'll explain. So Mitt Romney, of course, is running for president in the US in 2012. Even though he lost, his people accidentally made his victory website live for a day. And this is a screen grab where he talks about his vision for liberty, opportunity, and free enterprise. And so this is the last time where both American presidential candidates really embraced the liberal world. We've seen very different rhetoric in 2016 and indeed in 2020. So you can sort of date the era of uncertainty and regionalization from a lot of different time points. You can go back a few years before. I could have picked a lot of examples. I really liked the almost empty plane during COVID. As an example of, we're now questioning our prior assumptions. We're now wondering, when we think about investments, whether the previous world that we assumed would be present, that we assumed would have low likelihood of disruption, minor consequences of disruptions, still exists. We wonder if geopolitics might trump the benefit of openness, right? And so if we think then about risk, geopolitics increases the likelihood of damage to our investments. We wonder if dependence on openness rather than providing opportunities and profits will instead lead to vulnerability and increase the impact, the scope of damage. We accept greater uncertainty in the economic environment, and we worry about a realist world with the possibility of disruptive conflict. I'm going to primarily talk about the first bullet point due to the interest of time, but this is a news story from 2020, right, where masks were diverted. And in many ways, the actions of many states in 2020 during the peak of COVID exemplifies this new world that's very different from the era of high globalization. So now I'll give you 3 examples about how this might affect your thinking about investment. All right, anyone like football in the room?
Soccer or football?
European football, I'm in Europe. Yeah. So, investments. What investments in a football club are desirable? You know, the difference between when Abramovich buys Chelsea, 2001, and the sale of Chelsea, also not to completely complain about British football, but an example from Italy, right, where a overseas owner's financial problems then implicate what Inter Milan can do on the field. So this new world is leading football clubs, prospective owners, to think about what investments are prudent in this new context. Now, maybe if you're a Chelsea supporter, you don't have to raise your hand if you're a Chelsea supporter, it's okay. Maybe switching an American billionaire in for a Russian billionaire isn't that significant, but it really says something about long-term thinking. So maybe if football's a little bit trivial, does anyone use TikTok in the room? No. The students don't want to admit to using TikTok. You don't have to raise your hands, but we'll accept that. So information. Does who owns data matter? We would not have had this discussion in 2005 in the same way that we're having the discussion now over who owns TikTok, what happens, given the Chinese ownership, who has access to data. And what does that mean in a more competitive, re-globalized era? Who owns the 5G network? Whose intellectual property was used in making the new infrastructure? Again, the risk, the way we think about risk of who is investing where is very different given our global uncertainty than it was before. All right. Infrastructure, physical infrastructure and resources, right? And I could have picked examples from all over the developed and developing world. Who invests in companies that own critical resources? Is it desirable to have a Chinese company investing in a port, right? Under high globalization, the answer was yes, absolutely, right? We have the open liberal world, bring everyone in. But now, under uncertainty, we're starting to ask the questions. So I just bring 3 examples to show the practical effect of the uncertainty that the era of re-globalization brings. What I'm going to focus the rest of my remarks on are not actually providing answers, but to provide 4 scenarios of possible re-globalizations that hopefully we can build on and link into our discussion. And I'm not going to tell you which of these re-globalizations I think is true, although I think 1 is questionable, the other 3 I can see. But we'll talk a little bit about what all 4 of those mean. So first, re-globalization as a new unipolar hegemony. All right, so hegemony comes from international relations. That's one actor having more power than everyone else. Some people looking at the early globalized era in the 90s would say in some ways this is an imposition of an order by the US and countries friendly to it. This is, of course, debatable in international political economy, but it's one possible view. I don't think that this is a plausible future scenario. I don't see any one actor or any one group of actors being able to impose a new globalization on the economic order. This is something that's been discussed But I think of the possible futures, this is the least likely. And of course, in this era, if someone is imposing a globalized order, then the investment question is, what are the rules of this order? But we don't have a lot of choice but to live with these rules, right? It's if one party can impose global order. But I don't think this is likely because of the changes that we've seen. So I'm going to present 3 other things that I think are certainly possible. Re-globalization as multipolar regionalisms. So in international relations, multipolarity describes a world in which there are 3 or more power centers. Often this is viewed in terms of military power, but you can also apply this to economic power. And the key feature of this is uncertainty. So there's a broad possibility of disruption because there's a broad possibility of change. In many different regions, there are many different possible combinations, and these will be in flux. So if we look at Mr. Wolf's interjection of the concept of friend sourcing, this becomes very difficult if we believe the future is an uncertain multipolarity, because our potential friend today may not be our potential friend tomorrow, right? Not to make this all about, for example, Brexit, but something that when I studied in the UK in 2005, was certainly not something on my list of things that I thought were likely geopolitically. And now you have to look at the UK through different eyes. But we use the example of India in terms of friend sourcing. That depends on which future alignment you see for India, and you can see, I think, many different plausible alignments. So in this multipolar reglobalization, where there are many regional systems, you as the investor, as the maker of investments or the recipient, have to keep uncertainty at the heart of your calculation of risk. And this is obviously going to have infuse investment with caution. So a second potential scenario is reglobalization as bipolar rivalry. Right? So bipolarity is used to describe the way the world was during the Cold War. Right? You have an American bloc on one side, you have a Soviet bloc on the other side. Of course, it's a little bit more complicated to sort of neatly fit in China and non-aligned countries into this bipolarity, as any way of organizing the world doesn't fully describe it. But nonetheless, you can see behind the political and security bipolarity also an economic bipolarity during the Cold War. So there's a possibility that reglobalization will be reglobalization as 2 poles. America and China are, of course, the most likely, but we can come up with other potential bipolar competitions if we use our imagination. Yeah, so Dr. Michael said that when he was a student in the 90s, that there was sort of an assumption that international trade will lead to peace, which is something that should be contested. Of course, this has been highly contested in international relations, but probably the best theory in international relations is the theory of trade expectations. So it's not actually how much trade is happening right now, but rather my future perceptions of trade with another actor, and perhaps also my future perceptions of how much trade there will be globally. Right? So we can see a bipolar system as potentially prone to conflict, because if I fully embraced rivalry with the only other power bloc, my expectations for future trade with them is quite low. This, of course, poses significant problems if my strategy is to diversify, is that I want, from a European perspective, from a German perspective, if I want investments in the US on one hand, if I also want to increase my investments in China, while also hedging and trying to find countries out of the rivalry, because the more bipolar a system is, the more countries are forced to make choices. All right, those of you who are in this room who are of a certain age will remember a very popular person in Europe, George W. Bush, talking about whether you are with us or against us, was something that went over very well in Europe, as I remember. And in a similar way, you can expect, if you predict this system, to be asked very difficult questions, that investment on one side of the pole may mean investments on the other side of the pole will not be possible. Certainly in the United States, on both sides, no matter what happens today in the elections, on both sides of the aisle, there are increasing believers that re-globalization will be understood as this bipolar rivalry. So if you believe this is the future, this leads to some very difficult calculations. Do you want to cash in on one side? Do you want to play both sides, recognizing that this is going to significantly increase your risks in being caught in the middle? So another possible future reglobalization is a reglobalization that's reconstituted, right? Is it possible to think about multilateral cooperation in a new way, to write a new set of rules, to update the existing institutions that govern those worlds in a way that works for the post-financial crisis, post-COVID, post-Ukraine conflict world? And this is, of course, making some assumptions about all of those, using the word post, obviously. Is this plausible? And if so, how can I, as the investor or the recipient of investment, adapt to this? Will we have confidence in international organizations to administer these sort of rules, not on a regional but on a global level? Something that we've seen has been lacking in both political and financial crises in the recent past. And again, how do I, or how do we, adapt to this new world? In many ways, if you like liberal order, this seems like the most positive solution I've presented. But I think at the same time, there are two challenges here. The challenge to, can we see a clear vision to get there? Can we see this vision? And will actors who don't like this, and I think we can all imagine actors who don't like this, undermine a path toward this reglobalization? So I think all three of these, a multipolar competitive world, a bipolar competitive world, or I guess we could say a multipolar world that fits in with a reconstituted globalization, are all plausible visions. So what I'd say is, my sort of summing up message in terms of investments in reglobalization is, what decisions you should make about investments depend on which reglobalization you think is most likely. And this is, of course, the problem with strategic foresight, because I can't tell you which one of these three is going to happen, although I think we can have a good discussion about this later on the panel. With that, I think I have about 5 minutes left to take some questions, and I'm particularly interested to see if maybe raising football can attract a question from our students here in the audience.
Thank you very much, Dr. Green. Yes, we're going to now open up the questions to the audience here in Studio B as well as online. So please feel free to start writing in some of your questions, or we will be taking them here. We do have a microphone, so just put up your hand if you do have a question for Dr. Green. And we have your student questions coming, so as you had wished, you're getting them.
Hi, my name is Anna. Thank you for your presentation. It was very interesting. I have a question for you. I noted it, so I have to read it. I'm pretty sure you've heard about Elon Musk's investment in Twitter, and I don't want to become political here, but there are quite divided opinions on that topic, especially after his recent statements and surveys. So what's your opinion on one person holding so much power, on what could be consequences of his investments, referring to globalization and re-globalization?
That's a very good question. Of course, Elon Musk has been very overtly political in the last couple of days. But it's interesting that you frame this about Elon Musk having power. But honestly, aren't we the ones, by using Twitter, that give Elon Musk power? I mean, in this respect, if everyone quit Twitter, Elon Musk would have had no power. Well, I mean, he'd have the power of wasting $40-some billion. So it's interesting. In this respect, I'd say that the owner of a social media platform only has power to the extent that the social media platform is powerful. And social media platforms, and now I'm going to sound like an old person, but social media platforms have a short shelf life. Does anyone here own a MySpace account? If you're a student, do you know what MySpace is? Right, this was sort of the first big social media platform. This was the social media platform that everyone was going to use until Facebook was so much better very quickly afterwards. So just thinking historically about social media platforms, my takeaway is this was probably a very bad bet by Elon Musk. So I'm actually not that worried because I think Elon Musk has probably wasted money.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I saw another hand in the back, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I have a question about the geopolitical structures or decisions of mainly big companies. For example, I think about Amazon, for example, yeah. And their latest decision, I only knew them back in my high school days as a big shopping platform, for example. Now they are getting their hands on construction sites, on building certificates and more. So they're expanding on an enormous level. And I just thought, in which direction goes this geopolitical decision-making for big companies, and what does this mean for our globalization?
Sure. So part of the question is how much power will megacorporations have in the reglobalized world? And in many ways, it depends on which reglobalization we have. So for example, if we have a new multipolar cooperative environment, do we write rules that are friendly to large corporations to increase their buy-in, or are there rules that are antagonistic to them? I would say in general that the more conflict we expect in the reglobalized world, the less power the corporations will be able to exhibit, because the interest of the corporations will be most likely subverted to national security concerns. Whereas the more peaceful and more open we expect the environment, then we will expect the megacorporations to have relatively more influence. And World War I is an interesting historical case study when you look at what happened to globalized companies that were betting on an open and liberal Europe, and to see to what extent those companies weren't able to exercise influence over national decision making.
What do you think? What impact have cryptocurrencies on globalization?
I think the first question about cryptocurrency is a regulatory one. And it's a question of who has the power to do the regulation and then how to regulate it. The other question is how enduring are cryptocurrencies? Because so I made one prediction right about how good I think Elon Musk's Twitter ownership is. Maybe that's enough big predictions for tonight. But we have sort of less information about whether cryptocurrency will actually compete with the nation state for power, or whether it's sort of a passing fad. Because if it's the second one, it's a sort of a momentary issue. But I think the other question with cryptocurrency is, who does it benefit? And which globalization does it benefit? And so from my perspective, cryptocurrency is probably a net negative, because my perspective is that it benefits or makes more likely the more conflict-prone visions of re-globalization than the more open ones.
I would like to take a bet on the 4 models you provided. I thought it would be the bipolar one, but I have listened to a couple of lectures by Professor Mersheimer recently, and his point on the crusaders in the government, I guess Wolfowitz or people like that, trying to bring democracy all over the world, and the world rejects it. And thinking that Mrs. Pelosi went to the World Bank and came out of it after a long talk and said, well, we are working with our friends only and nobody else anymore. And thinking of Putin having prepared, obviously, a kind of commodities coalition with China, India, Iran, even, as I saw it, Emirates, Saudi Arabia, Brazil, the BRICS, so to speak, and some partners. There might be something very different, and there might be one pole bigger and stronger than the other, which is the BRICS alliance within, let's say, 2 or 3 decades.
That's very, very interesting. I'm not going to say it's not possible, but I'm wondering whether a Brazil, India, Russia, China, you can add other BRICS in if you want, whether they will have enough in common, particularly if you talk about Brazil and India, to actually hold them in, or whether if we're betting on the emergence of BRICS, we're betting on a world where India is a pole in its own right, which probably makes the world more a multipolar one. Do you have time for the question in the back?
Actually, I saw that we have a couple other hands, but due to the time, and we have to get to our next presentation, but I do ask those of you that had your questions, please hold them, because we can use those for our panel discussion. Dr. Green will be on our panel discussion here in a bit, so those questions, if you could please then refer to that time. Thank you again, Dr. Green, and thank you all of you that participated in asking questions. We are now going to be welcoming from North Macedonia, Professor Dr. Nanu Rusin. He is the Dean of Political Science of FON University, and he is going to be presenting to us this evening Enhanced Cooperation in Europe. So, Dr. Rusin, we welcome you here in Studio B. Yes.
From Skopje, from Northern Macedonia. Dear colleagues, I would like to thank for your invitation and participation in this extraordinary event, the East-West Forum. This event takes place at the time when we are all concerned about the epilogue of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Experts and politicians expect major changes in the world international order and the existing system of globalization. That's why I choose this topic. What kind of reglobalization after successive crises, the sanitary and Ukrainian crisis? Before I begin, I would like to apologize for 2 things. My text is long, and therefore I decided to present you only the summary. I submit the remaining part of the organizers of this event. I would like also to apologize that my English is not ideal. I'm Francophone, so please excuse me in advance for any language mistakes. Today, you know on depth that after the COVID-19 pandemic and Russia's invasion of Ukraine, a new world order is being created that can be bipolar, tripolar, or monopolar. Will it be a world that Thomas Hobbes imagined, with the chaotic war of everyone against everyone? Will it be the world that Huntington wrote about as a clash of civilization, or that of Francis Fukuyama, dominated by the model of Western liberal democracy and the United States? The process of deglobalization and reglobalization began before the sanitary crisis due to protectionist measures already in the second decade of the 21st century. The pandemic and the crisis in Ukraine have accelerated the dysfunctions of supply chains and the fragmentation of the global economy. And this time, the rule was confirmed that in time of crisis, every country turned to its own interest. Before the war broke out in Ukraine, experts anticipate that return to normal of the main macroeconomic variable as early as 2022-2023. Although Russia and Ukraine have a relatively small weight in terms of production, they are major producers and exporters of essential foodstuff, minerals, and energy products. The war caused economic and financial shocks and of enormous magnitude, particularly in commodity markets, where the price of oil, gas, and wheat soared. Changes in commodity price and fluctuations in financial markets translate into a reduction in global GDP growth, accompanied by several recessions and a rise in global inflation. Changes in the international order affirm far greater global stake than the conflict in Ukraine. In this context, this conflict may appear as the beginning of the maneuvers between the three largest powers, the USA, the European Union, and China. Of course, the behavior of the other G7 or G20 major powers is not to be underestimated. However, the final outcome that will result of the creation of the new world order will be dictated by the 3 or 4 major powers. The current world economy is the result of very long process of globalization, which began with the dissemination of the first human on the planet. With their descendants now live in a world unified by economics, but divided by politics and religions. However, this process is not only economic. The economy is not, in fact, an autonomous system with its own laws. The economy is only completing a multi-millennial movement that translates the fundamental unity of human society. After 1945, the Cold War prolongs the division of the world. The communist fortress extends to Eastern Europe and to immense China. Around 15, it's enclosed a third of humanity. But soon the system cracks, the reforms fail, the first China breaks its isolation in 1978, the Berlin Wall crumbles in 1989, and the USSR commits suicide. Never has victorious American power seemed so great. It is, however, contested by new heavyweights, formerly colonized or dominate, sometimes as larger as a civilization like India, China, Brazil. They step onto the world stage, which was monopolized during the Cold War by American-Soviet rivalry, while they grave up in the shadows. Now, thanks to their economic boom and globalization, these countries have strengthened both economically and geopolitically. Their role is strengthening, especially when the world leading powers, the United States and the European Union, are fast with the war against recession and inflation. The beginning of 20th century was the golden age of globalization. Thomas Friedman published his bestseller, The World is Flat, as the personification of globalization in all directions. The world has become flat, but also interdependent due to the globalization. At the beginning of 21st century, the United States is the undisputed master of the world. In the project for a new American century, drove up long before George Bush elections by his current collaborators, it is asserted that the United States must never again tolerate competing industrial or military power on the international scene. In recent years, the world has changed, both the crisis and the negative impact of mentalities. For the first time in the history of the international community, everyone's fear is manifested. Today, experts divide the period of the last decade of globalization into one before the emergence of the sanitary and Ukrainian crisis and the one after this event. The final epilogue is unknown. 3 is practically a silent war or globalization between the world's biggest power. Who can be victorious in that war, especially when the world is in recession? According to Thucydides' trap philosophy, war can weaken the warring party and result is long-term defeat, like the war between Athens and Sparta. Changes in the world order can result in a last 3 possible scenarios. A pessimist scenario then would mean new decade of a kind of interglobalist rivalry or Cold War between the bloc represented by China, Russia, and their allies against the bloc of the USA, European Union, and allies. The first are for major changes and taking the position of the First World Empire instead of the United States. The latter are for maintaining the current functional system on the international economic and political system. The former rather affirm authoritarianism, the latter democracy, or the latter the system of liberal democracy. If we were to compare this context with that of the Cold War, probably such a system in current condition could not last 45 years, but much less. Simply, the functioning of the economy cannot be limited by autarky and strict protectionism. In this case, we would be talking about a bipolar world and maybe a tripolar one, depending on the position of India and other non-European countries. The second possible scenario that will depend on the epilogue of the war in Ukraine and the fate of President Putin is the possibility that Russia will distance itself from China, and then the rivalry and the battle will be reduced to a clash between the United States and China, otherwise the most powerful economy in the world. In such a scenario, the European Union will play a significant role as a mediator in relation with Russia, China, and United States. And in this scenario, there will be deglobalization and reglobalization of economic and technological capacity. The third possible scenario is the overcoming of deglobalization and the re-establishment of globalization, or we can call it new globalization, with certain modified rules, but still with normal cooperation between the world's economic and political engines. The West and the United States, together with the allies, would continue according to the Fukuyama model, while China and the allies would continue to develop in their own political system without abusing economic performance. In any case, China will strive to ensure technological independence from the United States and win the leading place in the world as a global empire. Ambitions for the construction of the geopolitical and geo-economic project Silk Road will continue to be one of being strategic goals. That was in last Congress, that was the decision of China's Congress last week. Another scenario is theoretically possible, which is the Hobbes model of geo-economics war or rivalry of everyone against everyone, and perhaps toward geopolitical segmentation and the strengthening of unilateralism in the world. Finally, the role of Europe. Europe must show that it does not look like an ordinary cape of the Great Asia, but that is a brain with a big body, as Paul Verlaine called it. Regardless on the fact that political and economical power in the Eurozone tends to move to the north and east of the continent, Germany and France remain the main engine of the European Union. The future of Europe and the world depends on their solidarity, unity, and courage, on their wisdom and visions. Similar to the stone soup story, when some adventurers reached a village, they were hungry and asked the villagers to give them something to eat. They all replied that they had nothing. Then the adventurers took a lunch, filled it with water, and put stone. When asked what they were doing, they answered then they were making stone soup. By the way, they added then if each of you brings a bone, some meat, carrots, onion from home, she will prepare a real soup. That's what happened to her. Everyone from the home contributed to cooking the soup, which they shared in solidarity. It is the same with Europe. Solidarity and unity are trademarks of the European Union. Thank you for your attention.
Professor Dr. Rusin, many, many thanks. I don't know if he's still available for questions. Yes? Okay, he is still available for questions. Does anyone have a question online or in the room for Professor Dr. Rusin? We have two questions.
Thank you very much for your resume. I would like to ask, to show on the Ukrainian conflict, which role will play Russia as an economical state for the globalization after the war, for example? Yeah.
Thank you for question. You know, in this moment, we don't know what will be the epilogue of this crisis, but I think then if Putin lose the war, in this case, some possibility to influence the Russian political elites to turn and to change the direction in solidarity with China, and be one interest actor of cooperation with the European Union. But unfortunately, in this moment, Putin's ambition as like said, the classic geopolitician, then Eurasia, and Eurasia is the heart of the world, and maybe this is the possibility to impose something. But I'm sure then the future of the world is, like I said before, the professor before me, then this regionalism is positive, but we need to do something for a reglobalization, like in the past time, with new rules, but of course do something functional for the whole economy in the world. For this, the big question is if Putin will stay or not in the power.
I think we'll take one more question before we.
Thank you very much, Prof. Dr. Rusin. You mentioned Fukuyama and the end of history several times, and I'm wondering to what extent do you think the West still believes in Fukuyama's fundamentals, either in economic or in political terms, that he used in the end of history?
Yes, in all Eastern Europe countries, the Fukuyama model is acceptable, like a model of labor democracy, and of course is not the end of history, but democracy of labor democracy is one of very important values in all countries, especially post-communist countries, especially the countries of Western Balkans. Of course, the reality is not real like in American system, because all these Western countries have a dream to be member of European Union, but and the transition is very, very difficult in this moment. Then Balkans countries are big of national fragmentation, the problem of corruption, the problem of law, of respect of law, etc., etc. But I think then between Fukuyama and Huntington, it exists some big differences. And for example, in ex-Yugoslavia war, some theologians said then the Yugoslav war was the war between different religious, different ethnicus, because in ex-Yugoslavia, never the same religion had a war with other religion. That was for this reason is very difficult now. This reglobalization, political reglobalization in Western Balkan. We had the problem between Pristina, Belgrade, between Republika Srpska and other countries, etc., etc. We are in difficult situation, but step by step, it's possible to do something, some step in European integration.
Thank you very much, Professor Dr. Rusin. And we are hoping that next year we'll see you here live in Studio B and be able to welcome you here on campus. Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I think that you can kind of hear a little bit throughout the different presentations we've had that discuss about the impact of globalization and the challenges of globalization. And those are two areas we are going to look at after the break when we get into our panel discussion. So we're going to take a short break, okay, just to move around, and we'll be coming back and then heading to our panel discussion. And again, please feel free at this time to ask questions as well as write them into the chat. We'll see you in a few minutes. So, welcome back to the final part of our forum this evening. And as I mentioned before, we are going to now talk with our experts here we have on our panel discussion in regards to the impact and consequences of current megatrends on the global economy. As you've heard in the last couple hours, it's been discussed quite often with some very interesting questions that we never even got to finish as we were in the middle of our presentations. I would like to first begin in introducing who is on our panel, and then we're going to start right into the questions. Please remember that if you have questions, write them into the chat, or we'll be coming around in a few minutes with a microphone that you may be able to ask when we open it to the public. So first of all, again, welcome our expert panel. And I'm going to begin with introducing, to my far left is Anja Hermenau, and she is the representative of the Saxony State Economic Senate. Next to her, we've heard previously, was the Dr. Samuel Green, and he is a professor in the Department of Political Science, Global Studies, and Geography at Shepherd University in Shepherdstown, West Virginia. Also to my left is Dr. Pradit Kumar. He is the president of the Indo-European Education Foundation, as well as he's on the Faculty of Modern Languages at the University of Applied Sciences in Nysa, Poland. To my right is our very own Professor Dr. Serge Valesco, and he is the Dean of our International Management here at our university. And to my right is Mr. Max Jankowski, and he is the Managing Director of the Gießerei in Lößnitz GmbH Company Corporation here in Germany. So again, I would like to thank you, and I think that just to save time, because I think we've got lots of questions, I am going to open it up. And Ms. Hermenau, I'm going to begin with you with a question that we have. And the question is, climate change, demography, urbanization, economic growth, energy consumption, connectivity, and geopolitics are among the most prevailing megatrends that are explored. Which megatrends do you see affecting the small and medium-sized businesses, specifically for Germany, and why is that?
Well, the energy question and skilled worker labor force will be the most important ones, to my point of view. The demography is going ahead. Everybody knows, or has been known for the last 10 or 15 years, if you wanted to know, that the number of young people is shrinking. And so we have to educate everybody as good as we can, so to make him a skilled worker, which is only one part of the answer. And the other are invite skilled workforce from all over the world. Point is, since the country is deteriorating a bit, overdoing in the debt, national debt, and an unstable common currency in other European countries probably, maybe, you don't know yet. And then we do have a real acute energy problem at the moment and for the next couple of years, and that is really bringing our competitiveness down. So this is actually no country you want to go into if you are a skilled worker and you are able to calculate, because you can calculate that your pension you are paying in the system will not come out again. So to my point of view, we are not attractive to skilled workers from all over the world. Other countries are more attractive. Our social welfare system is overloaded. Our state's debt is too high, to my point of view. And we do have the acute problem with the energy prices taking us from the market immediately. A lot of firms are closing, and this is second-class burial, because they close first and then they go away to other countries where the energy supply is safe, stable, and you can afford it.
Okay. Dr. Kumar, I see you shaking your head. Would you like to add, or?
Yeah, just a little bit. It was very interesting to know your opinion, because India is one of the country now that we know that is the fastest growing economy in the world, and just contradictory to the statement what just we have heard from the first panel. India has the highest, youngest population in the world.
That's it.
So, highest, youngest population in the world. What it means, we have heard in previous some presentations as well. The productivity means globalization. Productivity means youth. Productivity means services. Productivity means young youth who can contribute for the generation of productivity for the country. So what we are watching in the country, the growth rate is going very fast, and we become as fastest growing economy. And not only during the pandemic time, when world economy were in the crisis and foreign capital, especially when we heard even the second speaker today from the beginning, foreign capital, which is also quite important for a nation when it is contributing for the development of the country. Imagine tackling your question even before about Elon Musk investment. And that question was quite important for me to understand. I wanted to answer you here in the similar session. A region where young people migrating, and you mentioned that the region is not attracting in the eyes of the foreign investors because you don't have productivity of the youth who can contribute more. Contradiction to that, watch out, just top 5 world economy. Just top 5 world economy. US, 27 trillion economy. Down to that, if you go, China, around 17 trillion. Third number, Japan, around 5.5 trillion. Go to Germany, fourth number, around 4.75 trillion. India, 3.51 trillion. Just this year, crossed UK. And the France is the 7th one now.
Right.
Yeah. Now, the question is, if the regionalism is affecting the globalization through the young population or the demography impact is playing a role. Because these are the factors what we have heard about globalization. So many problems we have now. Climate changes, labor markets and all. Imagine that these 5 countries, top 5, fifth one is 3.51 trillion. And compare with one company named Apple. 2.2 trillion economy. The entire worth of one company is 2.2 trillion. How many countries from the European Union, they come under that capital? Entire economy of Poland, from where I'm coming now, is around 700 billion. So the influence of a corporate on the globalization world is huge, which help you to increase the regionalism value for the global platform. And that was the part I wanted to contribute from your section here. And missing point is the young youth who can contribute and generate the productivity in the region, especially in the section here. And in Germany, that is the point what is to be considered. And India is one of the factors you can see as a country. We have heard about many presentations, either this side or that side or nowhere. Either you are with us or you are against us. There are so many questions we can come forward, and I will just commenting you on that, right? So my point of view is that demography is one of the factors today which is leading the world, because if a country like India, where you have the largest English speakers in the world after US, so you are able to communicate with the people, though even I'm Indian, and I want to communicate from North to South Indian people. I'm just like you. I'm just like you as a foreigner. So I have to use English as a link language, and that's make world community to come and invest in the country. We have also a very unique project, what we call it, Make in India. So our government has launched a project that we don't want to buy ready-made product from you. You have huge technology. So come to our country, invest here, and then produce your product. Make in India. Not made in India, make in India. And that's helped the regionalism to grow and level up to the globalized world. Yeah.
Very interesting.
Yeah,
Thank you. I'm going to now take this question over to you, Mr. Jankowski, because with your company, where do you feel the megatrends are, and what are some of the challenges that you are facing today and in this world of globalization?
Yeah. a foundry is probably the best company you can have now in these days. Yeah, it needs lots of energy. And that's the mega trend now. Before the war, it was like digitalization, something new types of furnaces. So I still use coal, yeah. Before the war, I was like the bad man, yeah. Oh, you're using still coal, yeah. You need to have like electricity or gas oven or something. But now I'm very happy with coal because the price of coal is just double high as before and not 10 times high as before, yeah. That's a good way. That's now the mega trends, yeah. Before it was like the topic about climate change, yeah. We want to save the climate, we want to save the environment, we have to think about processes, technical processes, and to save energy and save coal and save CO2, yeah. Now it's another point, it was a good point from you, yeah. It's like the mega trend, like the caveman, from the cavemans, yeah. We need energy, yeah. We need a lot of energy and affordable energy, yeah. And also with the 200 billions, yeah, from our chancellor, yeah. It won't solve any problem with that. Yeah, yeah, it's senseless. Sounds difficult or sounds crazy that I'm saying this, that the 200 billions are senseless, but they are, because after the 200 billions, there's nothing. Yeah, there's still no energy here. There's still no affordable energy, and there's still an industry who needs lots of energy, and it doesn't matter nowadays for the industry if the energy is green, pink, blue, or whatever. Yeah,
You need energy.
yeah, we need energy, and we don't see a concept yet in this country, and that's the point with India. I think that's a German thing. That's still a German thing. We're standing here now in the year 2022 and speak about network stability, yeah, about the winter, about heating rooms for
Collecting wood.
Collecting wood and something, yeah. It's crazy, yeah, and that's the time. And the bad thing on this is that the other mega trends, like digitalization and demography, they're standing still. There's no digitalization the last 2 years here. It was a little bit with COVID, a little bit, yeah, with MySpace, with MS Teams and something, yeah. But in the industry now, they don't have any time and capacity for these topics.
That's right.
They just hang on the phone and say, oh, where I can get some gas? Do you have some gas? No. That was the course I've made in this summer, yeah. I was calling with the gas supplier, yeah, where are my gas? Oh, we have no gas for you. Okay, and now? We don't know. Yeah, that's the topic now. That's the mega trend, and that's a very, very simply mega trend, but it is the mega trend in Germany now, and that's not correct. And we have to solve this problem, not with 200 billion. We have to solve this problem with an industrial strategy. Yeah, from our Green Party. Yeah, from the Ministry of Economy. Yeah, from Mr. Habeck.
We don't have a plan.
Yeah, we don't have a plan.
No.
That's the point, and I'm a little bit afraid about the future from medium-sized companies with high energy use. Yeah.
Because this seems to be such a really good topic, I don't want to really drop this question, but I want to get our last two panel input, and Professor Valesko, I will add your. What are your thoughts to what we have discussed so far, or what you consider the mega trend?
Indefinitely. The question about the energy, basically, it's the question about the global supply, because, you know, if all in all, we still somewhere we still have the gas, maybe we are not investing enough globally in this sector. We still have the coal, maybe the same problem, but we are over-investing in green energy. But the question is about the distribution and about the supply chain. And if you, from one day to another, just cuts the supply and say, hey, today we are, it's, you know, it's, and this is about the strategy, you know, to have the strategy is the same if we would say, okay, today I'm living in this house, and right now in summer I'm moving to the somewhere on the sea, in the winter I'm moving somewhere else, and I don't take care, and I can just rent here and there. It's not going the same story. If you are going to build up the house, you're supposed to live 10 years. The same with the energy. You cannot just switch because you don't like somebody from A to B. It will be the same with India and so on. Whether it's really global trend, I don't know. because I doubt that it's global trend right now, especially. So a global trend is more about the supply chain, and of course within supply chain, or global supply chain, or geopolitics, where we are going, how the energy going to be distributed, what is the strategy of the distribution. The other one about the attractivity of Germany, it's not just about the money, but the question is where the people, would like to live. And right now, especially, you can see it very, very interesting right now, especially with, because unfortunately, and this is awful because of war, we have the also middle-class people from Ukraine and from Russia, which are going globally. And the funny point about it, they don't stay in the one country, they move from one country to another to find the best place to live. And it's not just where they have the best condition from money-wise, it's the best condition where they're supposed to live. It means, what about the health? It's very, very much about whether you are young and 20s and where you're looking for somewhere where you get, on the one side, good education, but the other side, where you have really a lot of fun, or if you are around about 30 and you have the children, then it's about the education of the children, where the better education system and secure. And if you are 50 plus, it's again, it's about the health, it's about the safety, it's different approaches. And for this, back to you, again, we need a strategy in Germany. If you would like to track, the question is who's supposed to be attracted, and it's not just about, it's less about money, it's about the marketing perspective. Marketing is about the idea, what kind of people, what they are looking for, and then to make the condition and speak about it. And if I'm looking, if you take Mittweida, funny, a lot of people from around the globe, so we are right now with our double degree program studies, we attract the people from all over the globe, so from India, Pakistan, we have from a couple of people from Africa, from the East Europe, Middle East, and you can see that a lot of people consider to stay not just in Germany, even in Mittweida. And then it's come again, you need the companies, and the companies need an energy that they made to stay here. So the attractivity of this Saxony place, and even a small city like Mittweida, is enormous, and the conditions, I think it's possible to make it. But you have to have the strategy, and the strategy is something which you are not going to make just without on the paper, first of all, but you have to have it on the paper, and then you have to basically to implement it. And to implement such kind of strategy, the same with energy, you should not change from one year to another, but you have it on the long term, so it's something like 5, 10, 15 years. And then you need continuously some kind of environment where, regardless who is going to be right now in the politics or government, it should be some continuously process without changing from back and forwards. But because this is for strategy, regardless whether we are speaking about the energy, whether we are speaking about the attractiveness of the country, whatever, basically it's absolutely awful, and it's going to nowhere.
And where do you see it going, Dr. Green?
I guess first I will make a comment on energy. And now I'm going to sound like an American and a security studies professor. But I think we first have to realize to some extent that the energy challenges that a lot of Europe, but particularly Germany, is facing now are as a result of earlier policy decisions, right? So Germany made a decision about nuclear power versus other power sources, which is now shaping the energy environment. And that brings me to my broader point about megatrends. The thing I think I'm most interested in is how choices made now dealing with megatrends will constrain future possibilities. So we can see that, for example, in trade-offs. And I'll talk about the climate, energy, security nexus, right? What choices are being made now about energy that will affect what will be possible for climate later? Because you can imagine a strategy now taken for short-term concerns that will very much constrain what energy choices can be made later, that will make it further difficult to meet climate goals and commitments. In the same way, it was, as someone who's watched European defense spending, it was very jarring from an American for the Green Party to lead part of the discussion about 2% of GDP defense spending in Germany. But this is, of course, a trade-off. To what extent will increased spending on defense, which I don't think is just a German thing, but I think is something that we'll see across Europe, what trade-offs will be made to allow for increased spending on defense, and how will that constrain future choices? And then on climate, I think I want to make a point about whether climate will be seen as solutions that come from, I guess we can say it, investment in technical solutions, or if climate change will also require decisions about reducing consumption, because that will sort of further make the world more zero-sum. So I guess I see these three trends, energy, climate, and security, shaping the long-term environment depending on the choices being made now.
I'd like to pick up the energy question and the climate question. If you really want to have success within the reduction of CO2, I take it that way, and that's the most outspoken way. Then actually it would be much more sense, it would make much more sense if, for instance, Germany, but all the other industrial countries as well, would take half of the money they are planning to invest in their own countries for the reduction of CO2 and invest it in other countries who struggle with really old factories, old plants and things like that. I mean, I had been visiting China, I'd been visiting India. I know what it smells like if you're in some areas, and I remember that from GDR times here in our region. And my point is, if you have to bring down CO2 without any borders and as soon as possible, do not invest the money in the industrial countries. I mean, the bit we can save anymore is not worth all that money that is spent on it. This is really economic nonsense. And to my point of view, it would be a great help if you agree upon that, for instance, in the first place. And the second place, to my point of view, we do have a very special thing in Germany, and it's Mittelstand. And the point is, the technological precision, the technological depth of the machinery and everything else is well liked all over the world. And since the Germans are always offering service and spare parts if something is broken, things like that, they are bought a lot, those machines. And now the point is, if the German government is not able to provide energy to make them going on, and their goods and their products are spread all over the world, they will just leave Germany and go on, and all the world will yell at Germany because they didn't keep them up. And to my point of view, the nuclear question is one. You have a point, to my point of view. And I remember the discussions within the Greens. We shut off everything at the same time, which is nonsense as well. But where are the other parties? Not the Greens, the other parties, just following like little tiny, lemming, I don't know in English, so little tiny animals that walk one after the other and jump down into the ocean. Lemmings? Lemmings, okay, so close. And the point now is, maybe Europe will force the other European countries, because they are suffering from high energy prices as well, because of the German inner politics on that. Maybe Europe will force Germany into going back or getting back to nuclear, which would be a partner of sun and wind if you take the German nuclear power plants, because they are able to go up and down with their capacity, which is a certain patent we are holding. And so they make them partners to the sun and the wind not being there all the time. So this could work if one puts some beef into it and some money. But we do have a government that is really ignorant of everything that's going on in the world, to my point of view, personally.
You want me to comment?
You had raised your hand.
Yeah,
yes.
yeah, thank you. See, this is a very nice discussion what we heard from both the speakers and all over the panel. What is mega trend actually? I'm talking about the global trend, not about just in Germany. Mega trend, in my perception, being Indian living in Poland, watching European cooperation, mega trend is moving towards consumer market. So the consumer market, even you are increasing the force on the lawmakers, policy makers, it is consumer, which is letting them to think that now we have to find some solution, otherwise you'll be out of the office. Examples, you have Rishi Sunak in UK. Yeah. So best example you can see now in United Kingdom. So the countries in the global trend now is not so much important, but what is more important is individualism. What I believe, the point of globalization in 18th century, when we discuss about globalization, we supposed to understand globalization between the states. So a state-to-state cooperation called globalization. In 19th century, globalization turned on between corporates, companies. They host the shares and the cooperation between the companies, trading their goods, consumer market they're finding. Now in 21st century, I'm just getting out of this crisis which is faced to my neighbor country, but out of that, now we are living in the global world which is more connected with the individualistic approach. So individuals' interests are more. So world is going to be globalized with individual-centric world. Now, the gas issues and the energy issues which we are watching in the European Union, it is generated. This crisis has been generated. It has not been occurred from the nature. And we are utilizing it as a source of changing in the global layers. Layers, I call it, right? Now, in economic term, there is a very well understood a term, we call it, all of us, we are economists because we manage ourselves day by day, daily life. We have some income and we are expending it. So we call all of us economics as economists, but best economists or best citizens, best individuals in the global world is if you know how to fulfill your unlimited desires with limited resources. We all of us have unlimited desires. We want many things, but you cannot get it because you have limited resources. And that is the trend, mega trend, which is leading us to go for the re-globalization, what we call individualism basis. Now, beginning of the conflict with what we are facing in the neighbor countries in Europe, there was a question for India. Either you come to support us or you are against. As you are taking your individual interest in European Union as German interest, Polish interest, American interest, Indian government said we have our own interest. And our own interest, we are not supporting war. We are non-aligned government. We are non-aligned countries. Even Second World War, we were in non-alignment. So we don't support war. And we want to stop this war as immediately if you can, because it is loss of us, it is individual approach again. And we are moving towards, it was our Prime Minister, Modi, in 1 month ago when it was there was some kind of, in Kazakhstan, some summit. Yeah, you might be knowing about that. It was Mr. Modi sitting next to Putin, and he's saying that, Mr. Putin, this is not the time for war. It was huge in the media. You should think to stop it, not to supplying your crime or some instruments which is leading the war again. So either individualism, we are watching the mega trend. You want to continue this conflict, which is creating many different segments we have seen, bipolar world, multipolar world, or regionalism conflict on many issues, or we are finding the solutions, are staying out of this recreation of conflict what we are watching. So our lawmakers, policymakers are supposed to understand that individual approach. As another panelist mentioned, that either country from Ukraine or Russia, they are coming to the different part of European Union. They don't stay at one country. It was your statement. I'm just quoting that. Because there are individual interests. It is not the interest of a country that entire people from Ukraine or Russia go out. But people, they find their interest and they move on to each and every country by the age, by their race, and by their interest. So I think this is the mega trend. Beyond all these trends, putting down, and then we are moving further, which is supposed to be understood by the lawmakers and the policymakers. And I wanted to comment. Thank you.
I think this is a really good point. We've kind of stirred up a good conversation with a lot of different areas to discuss. And this is where I would like to open it up to our students in the room, to our academia in the room, to our guests in the room and online, to please begin providing questions to our panel discussion. We have the opportunity now with our 5 experts to get to pick their brains and to find out, to answer those questions that you may have. So I would like to open it up. If you have a question within here in Studio B, please raise your hand and we will give you the microphone. Oh my goodness, we've got hands going up. So if it's not a problem, I would like to start in the back with the students. I remember he had his hand up earlier.
Thank you very much. My question goes in the megatrend of gas, which we applied earlier. And for the role of Russia before the war, not only Germany was dependent on Russia's gas, also a lot of European and European states and European. And the thing is, a lot of people say after the war, whenever that may be, we don't want to use Russian gas anymore. We want, for example, gas from Canada, for example. And my question is, as well as for Germany in particular, but also for the European states, is this even possible from an economical point of view? Because we were so very dependent on Russian gas? Or is it just a question of moral not to buy gas from a war crime state?
Thank you.
Yeah, once the war is over, it's no country in the war anymore, so you should buy it again, to my point of view. I'm practical on that question. There is still a pipeline going through Ukraine and Poland, and actually there would be a chance to get Russian gas, which is important in the eastern part of Germany, because our machinery is calibrated to the specifica of the Russian gas. So Canadian or Angolan or Malaysian gas wouldn't do the job probably if you know what your machinery is like. So that means we are depending on a technological level on the specific criteria that the Russian gas is fulfilling. We are used to it, so to speak. Yeah? And to my point of view, there is no alternative in that, and it's via Hungary, probably the state enterprise of Hungary for energy is doing rather well. They have LNG terminals in Croatia, on Kirk, and other areas. So there will be import of Russian gas, I'm sure. And if the western part of Germany says we don't need it, it's fine with us, then they pay the five highest price for the LNG from the US, if they send it anyway. Qatar has explained well, maybe 2026, and then we have to invest, as the French do, for instance, because we have to invest in infrastructure and get prepared to have another huge customer. And this takes a couple of years and a lot of money. And Habeck says, oh, no, we will have biomethane things and like... I don't know whether he knows what dimensions we are speaking about. Sometimes it's like a little tiny pot with a flower in and a whole forest, and he mixes it up, same sites. Not at all.
Mr. Jankowski, what is your opinion? And how would you like?
Yeah?
Yes.
Yeah, I think in the future we need the gas from Russia. Actually, I'm sorry for America, but actually I see...
they will need themselves.
I see no difference between gas from Russia and gas from America, because the gas from Russia is much more climate friendlier, because it had not be on a ship and something like this. Sorry. And the thing is also with the infrastructure, with the LNG terminals. Try to build an LNG terminal in the next years. Yeah. Other question or other point, try to build a house nowadays. It's not possible in this time. So we need this gas actually from Russia. Yeah, that's my opinion. Yeah, sorry. But we will see how the war will end. Yeah, the war has to end. It's very important that it's still, then there's no more weapons from Germany and something else. I don't understand this. Yeah, I'm young. Yeah, 29, not that old. And that's the point. War is a new thing for me. Yeah, and it's very mind-blowing for me that some kilometers in this direction there's like a war going on. It's crazy with German weapons, with European weapons, with American weapons, with something else, with weapons. So people shot people there. It doesn't matter who people, but they shot against. Yeah, they kill each other. It's crazy. Yeah, but the point there is the war and the gas. This is another thing. Yeah, and if the war is over, we have to think about to go back to the Russian gas, because it makes the other point makes no sense. With the industrial Germany, with our industrial nation, it makes no sense, actually. We need the gas also in the future. There is no enough sun, there is no enough wind, there is no enough hydrogen. We need this energy.
By the way, gas is used as well as a raw material, for instance, for AdBlue. So we do need, for climate reasons, AdBlue to add this to our fuels to make the emissions lower. And you need natural gas for that, because you get urea, Harnstoff, out of it, and you need that for AdBlue. So it has an impact if you don't have enough gas, not only in heating flats.
But there's a big difference between the Russian gas and what's going on now in Ukraine, you know?
Sure.
To think about infrastructure and to think about what's going on there, two different types. But in the future, if the war is over, we have to think about this again.
Okay.
I'll add sort of a couple of comments from a security studies perspective. So in general, a refusal to buy is only useful geopolitically in changing what a country does if you have most of the world in alignment. Right? If you have lots of countries who are not aligned with a boycott, it's not likely to be effective. And in some cases, even one or two important strategic partners of a country, say North Korea, can help it evade some of the consequences, not all. Yeah, so from a strategic perspective, if some European countries refuse to buy from Russia, it may be important for moral messaging, but it's very unlikely to be effective as a tool of economic statecraft. On the contrary, Russian refusal to sell gas will be in the short term much more effective because of the dependence of a lot of countries in Europe on it. And this comes to a question of fungibility. It's a fancy economic term for how easy it is to exchange one thing for another. And so, for example, if you like chicken and you go to the market and chicken is 50 euros instead of 5 euros, you might buy beef, and that's relatively fungible. But energy isn't nearly as fungible. Eventually, you can change your energy to whatever beef is. Well, beef is not ecologically friendly, so beef probably isn't solar power. But over time, you could be much less dependent on gas in general if you chose to make those decisions in the long term. But in the short term, Russian decisions will be more influential in Europe than the other way.
Okay, thank you. The next question, please.
Yeah, I have a question about the megatrends. One of the megatrends which is given by the German Zukunftsinstitut is the megatrend safety and security. And my question to the group here in front of us is, what do you think about the megatrend safety and security, especially if we think about critical infrastructure, especially in the manner, for instance, of pipelines and also internet connections? And what do you think about this? What should we do in order to protect our infrastructure?
Professor Velasco.
Really?
Yes, please.
I'm not really the expert about it, and of course my colleague knows my opinion. Nevertheless, the question is about what is the value of it. Basically, it's the same as military expenses. The question is how much is indefinitely on the one side. You have to protect it. On the other side, the question is what is the risk management behind it, and it's a matter of the evaluation. And that's basically it. Whether it became megatrends, it depends on geopolitics. The more tensions you have, the more you are going to spend on it, because it's, as you mentioned, it's critical. The less tension, if there is no tension, you forget it, because it's just you are spending money for nothing. It's like insurance, you know. You don't need insurance, so you are not ill. And if you are getting ill, it's too late. What is the proper way? What kind of insurance you need? It depends on judgment. That's why there is no answer on this question.
Well, I mean, from and now this is an American perspective, yeah, but you know, I've often criticized decisions made in America on, you know, what is in fact critical. If you look at American spending on, say, counterterrorism, as opposed to other more boring things like modernizing our electrical grid. Right. So from my perspective, what's critical and what's easy are the most important decisions. And I think just using America as an example, some of the things are incredibly difficult to protect, but modernizing your electric grid, for example, it could have been accomplished for the cost of some of the other things America wastes money on. So I think part of the critical infrastructure protection and security spending is better efficiencies and better identification of easy wins.
Okay. Thank you. Next question.
Yes, so my question was to Dr. Green, but it can also be discussed by everyone. At the beginning, you mentioned the risk of the development of social media applications like TikTok. Do you think that fake news about any kind of economic stuff could somehow end in a real financial crisis because our generation has become so badly influenced by social media?
So that's interesting. Could fake news trigger an economic crisis? I don't think fake news could trigger a crash simply because there are so many voices that even if you're not deliberately cross-checking, you're going to get information from multiple inputs. But it certainly could contribute to worsening these conditions. I also think maybe you're being a little bit unfair to your generation. Now I'm getting old and I'm too far away from student generations, but I think all of our generations have also at one time been young and impressionable and made foolish choices, and some of our generations continue to do that when we're older. But yet I actually think that young people are less likely to be misled by fake news on TikTok than someone who's not very experienced as a consumer of social media. And in fact, if you look in the United States, some of the worst proliferation of fake news has been in, say, the 55 and older group, who are less savvy at understanding what is fake news. So I actually think that younger users of social media can sometimes perhaps be more sophisticated at understanding what is and isn't true, because you are native speakers of that in a way that no one on this panel probably quite is.
Thank you. I saw some other hands that were raised.
Thank you. My question is to the foreign guests, to the experts, Mr. Kumar, Mr. Green. One of the most important problems the mid-sized companies here in Germany is we don't have enough skilled employees. There's a huge lack of skilled handcrafters, engineers, and so on. I represent 3 mid-sized companies in Chemnitz. What we need are employees. And I ask why, since 2015, we have 2.5 or 3 million migrants came to Germany, refugees. My knowledge is only 10 or 15% of them are in jobs. So, what's the point of view from outside, from your expertise? What is attractive for Germany and which topics are not attractive? Why don't come the right skilled people? An example is the Czech Republic is only 60 kilometers from here. The average earnings per hour for handcrafters are 8 to 9 euros per hour. In Chemnitz or here in the environment, we pay in minimum 12 euros, but we must pay 14, 15, 16 euros per hour. But nobody comes. What do you think, from your point of view from outside, what is attractive for Germany and what not? I think Mr. Jankowski has the same problems in his company. We don't have enough employees. What do you think? What's your expertise, your meaning from outside?
Thank you for asking this question, actually. It is very effective question for today's world. Watch out, when I mention India has the youngest population in the world, it means this population can go both ways. Either in a wrong way, if they're not skilled, or they can go in a right way if government has a plan to skill them and take them in the labor market. What government of India is doing. So we have a Skill India, a project under which we are providing a school education system. Then also the skill development institutions are working to make them in the labor market. Now, comparing 2 markets, being in Poland and now connected with Germany as well for few years, we are working together now. Poland, just I give you some figure to clear the mind and then I will take further this question. In 2014, Poland had 217 Indian students at entire Polish universities. 217. Polish ambassador in New Delhi is responsible for giving visa for 6 countries: India, Nepal, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Maldives, and Bhutan. Imagine the strength of the population, and they were giving the visas. When I realized these things, I was in a panel with the foreign minister in 2014 with the Polish government. Because there was a time when Poland and India were celebrating 60 years of diplomatic relationship and economic ties. I was very controversial because I just raised this question by saying we have many things to celebrate, but one thing we are lacking behind. If with 1.25 billion people, you have one ambassador sitting in Delhi and giving with your top-most universities, altogether you have 217 students studying in Poland. Imagine how effective you are and how many ambassadors you are creating for yourself who will be going back to India and talking about you. I know Poland, I know Polish food, I know Polish language, I interact with the Polish culture. So they will be talking about you. And you should focus on that higher education system to call these people from India who is seeking higher education, they're not able to get admissions at the Indian universities. Let them to come here. Skill them according to your needs. Give education what you are providing. And once they get back, they are your ambassadors. And somehow it worked. And by 2019, I give you data. Can you imagine what could be the maximum number of students who reach from 2014 to 2019? Any figure from you, audience? Just imagine. You're closer? It was more than 9,000 students who joined the universities in Poland. And the flow has begun. My Indo-European Education Foundation has promoted these activities in India.
So now we close this project because it's already running on. So what happened? Once students move in, we had no direct flights from Warsaw, Delhi. Now watch how economy is moving on. So once these students' mobility come up to Poland, Polish government decided to launch direct flight. Warsaw, Delhi, and this June, they have launched Warsaw, Mumbai. 2 destination, straight flight. What it means? You are getting trade. So trade also increased, and these skills workers, when they come here, they get education, they stay in your country, they integrate with your culture, they learn your language, they learn how to behave in your society because they have not learned being in India. So you are teaching them to be adaptive in a new society. And that is the point, when all these Indians, they come to Poland, it doesn't mean that 100% they are going back. Most of them, they are hired by the companies, being at the universities. So this way, they are at least filling some gap of the labor market which is needed. For example, I give you 1-2 companies' name. Infosys is one of the Indian company, one of the largest IT company in India. They are outsourcing in Poland. They have location in Łódź. They are hiring around 10,000-11,000 people. Probably you know also, this is very famous now because a Prime Minister of UK, Mr. Rishi Sunak, his wife is the daughter of the chairman of Infosys. And she's still not British citizen. She's Indian citizen. It means her capital, she's holding the highest capital in the company. And she's, or both couples' wealth is 3 times higher than the King Charles. And they don't pay any taxes. Her lady is not paying taxes because she's not British citizen. What I mean to say, you need to think in Germany in the similar way. You want to just get a labor, low-skilled migrants, or you want to get high-skilled migrants. If you decide high-skilled migrants, what are the process? You want to make them high-skilled according to your society, according to your needs in the company, being in India, or you want to give them opportunities for admitting them at the universities, colleges, even industries, to let them to train for 6 months, 3 months, and then hire them. So in that case, they're already in Germany. They study with you, they interact with you, they come across with the cultural communication, and they're more effective and influential workers for the labor market. Another example is one of the company we are cooperating with is TZMO from Poland. Probably you know about. They are producing Bella. They're in Torun. They have 2 branches in India, Mumbai and Bangalore, Hyderabad somewhere. So what we do when students they come from India, we had tie-up with them. So being as a student for 3 years at the university or 5 years for the master program, we send them during the break to the companies. So they get training, and once they complete the training, get back here, they are the potential employees for the company, either in Poland or in India back, because they have branches there. So such kind of trend, if you adopt or you suggest in Poland, I see is a huge potential for Germany or Indian cooperation, because we have labor market, we are the service providers, and there is no issue for language. Anyone who want to communicate with them, English is enough for Indians, because even from east to west, I travel. If you're traveling with me in India, and I'm traveling in India from south to west, I'm just like you. I cannot read their languages. I don't understand their languages, a script as well, because we have 627 dialects in India. So if you want to communicate with one another, we use only English. And English has been called as linked language. So if company has employees, HR, who can communicate with English, I see this is the best possible way to let them to train, bring them here, and then adapt in the market. Or you can create a dual program with the Indian universities or Indian companies who can hire them, give them some training, letting them to understand your needs, and then transport them to here to work for your companies. So that is the win-win situation what I can do, either for the education purposes or the training purposes for the industries. So these are the way how I suggest to go. Because these are the case studies we have already experienced with Poland. And you are with the Germany very close, and we have even much more trade, bilateral trade with India, comparing with Poland. So I think this is the win-win for both the countries.
And Dr. Green, how would you, your input?
I agree with Dr. Kumar. I'll just add a couple things. One is that the labor market, as you know, is not that globalized, even in the most global era, and so it's thus a very inefficient market. And so this is a political problem, right? So the first thing is that I think not just in your country, but also in my country, the business sector has not necessarily been effective at communicating with political parties, particularly political parties in my country who are most commonly identified as being aligned with the business sectors, who have skilled labor shortages, of the need to liberalize labor markets. So I think that's the first point. I mean, the second is I think we need to look at why hasn't the refugee population in Germany been better integrated into the labor market, because I would have expected, if you'd asked me what numbers I'd expected, I would have expected better results. So the second question is, where has that gone wrong? How can that be resolved? And then the third thing, just to echo what Dr. Kumar said, is Germany has a very strong educational sector. Is Germany doing enough to take advantage of that? I know in the United States there's this fiction that graduate students are supposed to go back to their home countries. And there's this awkward dance when you're at immigration and you have to say you're going to go back even though you really want to do your PhD and get hired by Microsoft and stay in the US forever. But there's also a very real desire among some parts, and I'll just speak about my country. I assume it's the same in Germany from what I know. There's a very real desire to reduce immigration, even among some of the most skilled immigrants. In fact, the parts of the Trump administration were deliberately making it challenging for PhD students to come to the United States. And that's, I think, something that has to be combated to solve this. So I agree with Dr. Kumar, but I also think that we need to look at the sort of political and policy impediments.
Thank you. As we have seen, this could be a discussion that could continue, but the purpose of this forum was to give a platform where these issues are brought to the surface, where these issues are discussed, to kind of have us as listeners and participants to have it churning and cycling through our head about a wake-up call. What is happening? How do others see it? There are major impacts and there are major challenges that we cannot solve here in this time period. But it is our wake-up call to be the active game changers and to be the ones to listen to what's going on and decide where is it going and what should we be aware of. And that's a word we used often here, was awareness and adaptability. And I think that's something that we need to take into consideration. I want to thank our panel experts for this, and I want to hand it over to Professor Valesco in regards to his final words for our forum and our platform.
Back to the more comfortable chair.
Oh, I think, just stay here. We only need a couple minutes, yes.
So, closing word. As I started to prepare the closing word, there are one thing that I saw that I all the time was thinking about. It's supposed to be basically a Chinese saw, and if you don't like somebody, you wish him, may you live in interesting times. It's look like this wish come true to all of us. There is unfortunately no doubt that we have a lot of, we are living in interesting times. We have a lot of changing dramatically and very, very quick. Corona, climate change, supply chain problems, demography, war in Ukraine, energy. So this list can be continued. But would you be here if you would not stay optimistic? We have to, otherwise it's too boring.
So that's why I was looking for another source, and there are a couple of which came from Russia, basically, where is my mother tongue come from, and I think they are very much applied. There are two of them. One is if you cannot change something, take it easy and enjoy. Not really suitable, a little bit, but at least we have to be, I think, to have some break and to look on the lot of changes from more relaxed. And the otherwise, even better suitable, if you can change something, take a lead on it. And I think this is what we are basically doing with our discussions, where we supposed to do, especially the young people, our students. And there are two issues about it. It's the first issue, it's matter of the perspective, of the attitude, how you take it, from which perspective you see it. And the another one is that the changing world is offering huge opportunities. Of course, it's challenging. Of course, there are a lot of things where you can come down, but on the other side, especially for the young people, but also for basically all of us, there are a lot of opportunities. And the point is, the issue is to see and to recognize them. If you recognize, if I'm looking on my own life and I'm looking back, there are some opportunities that are just oversee, and okay, it's bad luck a little bit, but fortunately, a couple of opportunity. And I'm pretty sure if you look back to your own life, you will see came to Poland or to make the political studies, and definitely there are other opportunities, but you recognize them, and you make the right move. And to recognize them, you need to understand what's going on, what are the drivers, who is the stakeholders, what kind of the options you have, etc., etc. And basically this forum is exactly one of the ideas of this forum, and also our study programs, is to discuss it and to make you aware, and especially aware our students, but also for us, it's a platform where we can come together. We will have the representative from policy, from industry, from the educational, where we come together and discuss in a different perspective, and also generate the ideas, because if I'm looking backwards, and it's not our first forum, there are a lot of our study programs and special double degrees programs, a lot of initiatives between internationally with other universities, but also initiatives with the industry partner and our partner from the politics came based on the discussions and bring my opinion, excellent fruits. And we had very interesting experience, knowledgeable speakers who shared their different approaches, different ideas, views on globalization and deglobalization. So basically we are over time, that's why I'm skipping a lot of things which I'd like to share and to speak about. There are two things which I'd like to still to mention. First of all, as I asked the team, and I got the knowledge that there are a lot of participants which were online, and I think, and I'm pretty sure that it's not just our students who have who got this view, but also from basically 3 different, or even 4 different regional continents, from US, from Asia, from Europe, and even some from Latin America. Thank you for the participation. We are still eager to see you one day on our side and to have the discussion present, especially consider to participate and to come over to study here for 1 semester or for complete study. We are just set up our double degree, which we are successfully running since years. It's basically what you said about the double degree between India and Poland. We do it since years with a lot of countries. It's extremely successful, by the way. We make just very shortly market research. And funny point, or surprise, surprise, first of all, there is in really no unemployability. All of them, after 3 months after graduation, got the job. Moreover, it's 10% over their salaries, 10% over the average salary of the business administration graduates in this country. So we are not comparing India with Germany, with Poland. We are comparing either with India or other with German employed market and Poland and some other countries. In other countries, by the way, it's even higher than 10%. We are speaking 10% is minimum, and it's Germany. So consider to do it. And last but not least, I have to sincere thanks to the benefactor of this event, Dr. Matthias Rossler, President of the State Parliament, for his continuous support. The other point, very thankful for the speakers. I'd like to basically to invite you in 1 year to continue our discussions. I think it was too short, so we have something to discuss and to continue. And I'm pretty sure that we are going to have a lot of topics. And in 1 year, the world is not stopping to develop. Huge compliment and huge thanks for unbelievable teams which make this possible. And it's just amazing that there is everything running just perfectly. So it's online. It was challenging, but thank you very much. And once again, thank you for your attending and participation. Until next year, again here in Mittweida and online, again in November, we are going to inform you. See you again.